OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
You're very welcome along. It's Monday morning. We are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed heading into a brand new week, and plenty for us from the weekend to get our teeth stuck into. Multiple disappointments, except I'm the only one disappointed. Shane's here. Shane, how are you?
I'm very good, Ger. How are things? Great. Good morning to everyone. How's all?
Do your little lap of honour there.
Listen, I was watching. If
there's any little ears in the car listening, then you should probably turn off, because at any point something might happen.
Yes. Last Monday, I was obviously recovering from my festival antics. I was not here, but I did watch back the reaction to the draw. Great draw for Kildare, apparently.
I didn't say that.
No. But it was the general consensus in the room.
I mean, it was actually a good draw.
It was, to be fair.
They could easily have won that game. Yeah. But it turns out they didn't.
It was it was an exciting game. Ruined somewhat by officiating to an extent, but we'll not dwell too much on that. I think both teams got the brunt of it. But yeah, absolutely delighted. Sure, you have to be in it to win it. Only eight teams left, lads, and Monaghan could do it. This could be our year. 3 more wins.
You surely realised halfway through that that's not going to happen.
Yeah, look, inevitably they're going to draw Kerry this morning. I've already called it. It's going to be Monaghan Kerry.
But Kerry can only play Monaghan or Tyrone.
Exactly.
So
50-50 chance.
50-50.
Yeah.
It's not bad for the 11th best team in the county to somehow scrape
in the
through
country,
top 8 in the country.
It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think the power rankings were perfectly legitimate up until with about a minute left to go when they hit the front.
Well, I see squeaky bum time. Monaghan always.
Sorry, a minute over extra time. What am I talking about?
Well, no,
I missed the key fact there, that it was like the game was over and referee's still playing on.
If you actually watch it back, the entire first minute of the injury time, additional time, was wasted on referee not letting Monaghan get on with the game. They wanted to take a free, and they were just standing there for 40 seconds as Ryan Wiley was told, no, wait there. So watch it back, and you might assess it differently.
Watch it back.
Yeah. So I looked that the decisions went horribly for both teams, but
right.
Yeah, in the end there had to be a winner and there had to be a loser.
Congratulations on your imminent quarterfinal exit.
Well,
hope you enjoy the big day out.
Don't speak too soon. We'll see you next Monday.
We shall see. Yeah, you won't. I'll be on holidays.
Okay.
Nathan, hello.
Good morning.
Also another lap of honour. As I frequently say, clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am.
Yeah, listen, this has become sort of run-of-the-mill stuff at this stage for Mayo, hasn't it? Beating Galway, knocking them out of the championship.
Yeah.
4 times in 5 years.
I often wondered what Alex Ferguson meant when he called Ince a big-time Charlie. For me, when I heard it the first time, I was like, he's only interested in the big games. He only puts it in when the cameras are there. But that's not really apparently that's not what it means. But for me, Mayo are the ultimate big-time Charlies, right? It didn't matter last week against Cork when they had the game. It was too easy. They needed somehow to give themselves a weird sense of do or die. It's Russian roulette. That's all they're interested in.
You're saying that like it's a negative?
I mean, yeah, there's like a little bit of me that just goes, just learn how to be the Dubs, be boring.
You're saying Mayo know how to perform.
Where is the fun in that?
Where is the fun in that?
If we'd just been that and also not won all the All-Irelands, life would have been a lot duller for Mayo people.
Or if you'd won any of them, would have been a bit better, would it?
Well, clearly.
All right, okay.
Come on.
We're going to get into it. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock. A lot of people giving out about referees. Coming up straight away, performance rankings. Anthony Moyles at 8 o'clock, Sarah Donovan at 8:25. That's football and hurling. 8:45 sports news with Cathal Mullaney. Gary Sice is going to give us the Galway verdict. Alan Quinn is going to look back on the under-20s remarkable draw with England at the start of the World Cup, and then a clip from the Sunday paper review around about 9:30 this morning. We're live with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shaver, your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. It's time for the Gillette Labs performance rankings.
That wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. Our performances was just lacked that intensity.
Let's make Nathan Murphy's face even smugger this morning. We'll start in the green, just to get Mayo in there. I think we're doing Mayo, aren't we? Let's do it anyway, regardless. One of the stats that popped up on screen during the first half that took my interest was own kickouts 1, Galway 3 out of 3, Mayo 2 out of 10. And by the end of it, didn't matter.
We've opened the kimono accidentally there a little bit. It said Cork and Meath, but we've deleted them.
Meath.
We've deleted them, yeah.
So congratulations to Meath, of course, in their Tailteann Cup semi-final win over Antrim. But
And down.
I mean, it goes in Croke Park.
Yeah, I mean that is ridiculous.
It's not bad, and that's going to be a mouth-watering final down in Meath.
So it's Mayo and Cork. That's what we're doing, right?
Yes, we're doing Mayo and Cork. So look, just to keep Nathan happy, Nathan started crying in the pre-show production meeting, and insisted that we start with Mayo.
Well, I think Mayo deserved to be in there, regardless of their own performance. Galway were many people's favourites for the All-Ireland, and Mayo have just gone and beaten them. It is peak Mayo that they would beat Kerry and Galway.
And still not win All-Ireland.
And probably still find themselves drawn against Dublin in an hour's time in an All-Ireland quarter-final.
So we can basically work out the draw, can we?
No, there's a lot of what can't happen.
Yeah.
Like Kerry can only get
Monaghan or Tyrone. Mayo can't get Kerry, but they can get one of the other three.
One of my Dub supporting mates was like, "Oh yeah, hopefully we'll get Cork and it'll be on in Páirc Uí Chaoimh." Is that a possibility?
No, they're all going to be on in Croke Park.
That's
two
what they
double
said.
headers.
But what if they change their minds? New information came to light.
I don't think new information comes to light with quarterfinals. Doubleheader in Croke Park. It looks like Mayo are going to be playing on Sunday, so they get the full 7-day break, considering all the other preliminary quarterfinals were on Saturday.
Well, Dublin will be Saturday night, won't they? They always are. They'll be the second of that Saturday night.
It depends on what the draw is. If it's Mayo Dublin, it might have to be Sunday.
There is an All-Ireland semi-final on a Saturday evening and a semi-final on a Sunday. That Saturday evening in Dublin could be a good night.
Yeah. I mean, the ties, it's going to be 4 outrageously good ties regardless, isn't it?
Well, you could end up with a lopsided draw where you could end up with
Monaghan, Cork,
Kerry against Tyrone, Dublin against Mayo.
On one side. Can you? Are Kerry and Dublin not separated?
Well, I think it all depends then on the results of the quarterfinals.
Yeah,
they seem quite non-committal as to what will happen the whole way through.
There definitely is like a bit of wiggle room for the draw makers in what might happen next.
Here, enough of what might happen next. How's about you get talking about what just happened?
Okay, yeah, Mayo. What happened? How did they suddenly come from being dead and buried, from wetting the bed against Cork the way they did? A swoon. It was the opposite this time.
Keeley O'Connor coming off the bench, scoring that inspirational point.
It was such a strange game. It was such a Pearse Stadium, Salt Hill match where the wind was the dominating factor. It was how much of a lead could Galway build up by half time, and 5 points didn't feel like enough. It should have been far more, albeit Mayo started really well, got 3 points on the board, but Mayo went up against a Galway side who had their outstanding player in Shane Walsh just totally off form. Was it 4 wides he kicked in the first half in a row at a time where Galway were really trying to stretch that lead, and it's a totally different game if Galway are going in at the break 9 points up to 5 points up in terms of the psychology for Mayo, thinking we're going to have to go out here and somehow rack up a big score in the second half, and Galway can sit back ultra defensively if they want. They also went up against a Galway side who 2 of their best players in Sean Kelly and Damien Comer just weren't fit. Kelly, the ankle, from minute 1 you were looking at him going, oof, he's not fully at it today. Comer goes off at half time. So I think when you look from a Galway point of view, and the expectation that was on them this year, and Port Choice is very honest afterwards as to how disappointing a season it has ended up being, you need your best players on the pitch and you need them playing well, and they didn't have that.
Their injury profile has been really unfortunate. I still think we hadn't seen them beat a really top tier team in the championship outside of Connacht, and I keep making the point that I think these competitions, you have to take them each on their own individual merits, and I don't know, so in a way that's why it's suited Monaghan to be in the league scenario that they've been in. I think the difference between Monaghan and Kildare was a decade of Division 1 football, and also Monaghan's propensity for winning in the 75th and 76th minute. Conor McKeown's great piece today, where he's just reflecting on the post-match comments, but pointing out that Monaghan have done that week in, week out. And I think from Mayo's perspective, they have more of their best players fit and in form at the moment than Galway do, and there's no difference between a lot of these sides. I don't think Mayo are capable of winning the All-Ireland from here.
No,
I don't at the moment.
Doesn't feel like it, but
Now, Croker, who knows? Maybe Croker is actually what they've been waiting for all year.
As I said last week when the draw was made, Mayo are doing what they did during the Rochford era, which was mirroring what the opposition bring to them and the level of intensity. And it was the same yesterday when Galway upped it. Mayo were able to up it as well. I think there's a lot of positives there still from a Mayo point of view, in that the players that Kevin McStay brought in yesterday all performed. Now you could throw it back and go, does he know what his best 15 is right now? Maybe he doesn't, and we probably feel, because it's Kevin McStay, Stephen Rochford, Lee McHale, that this isn't a first year management team and it would be perfectly normal for them not to know what their best 15 is right now. You feel they should be further along the track than that. But
they did seem to certainly post-match, he's very honest with Tommy, where he's like, I have different plan depending on playing against the wind, playing for the wind, playing with the breeze. And Hora got sick overnight, couldn't travel with the team, and so the building of the depth was the thing to give them the opportunity to have different game plans and different personnel on the pitch. So I don't think there is a best team anymore, is there?
No, you wouldn't be surprised to see Matty Ryan come in, depending on who the opposition is, in an All-Ireland quarter-final. Like, the big boost is, you look at Dave McBreen's goal and his performance yesterday. Full-back has been a bit of a struggle for Mayo over the last few years. To have a young player come in and make that sort of impression, and the confidence boost he should take from scoring a goal of that quality in a game of that importance, is absolutely massive. So when Mayo got to the All-Ireland final against Tyrone, I don't think anyone thought they had enough to probably even get to an All-Ireland final. A lot will depend on the draw.
Was the team that got to Tyrone not like, were they not favourites for that final?
They probably were, just because it was Tyrone. But I think at the start of the year there wasn't a... So yeah, when you look at what Kerry and Dublin have right now, it's probably hard to make a case. But that's the magic of this Mayo team.
They could best the rest, and
as you said, they know how to win these big games. Like, they have done it consistently, much like the fact that Monaghan year after year have these tough games against similar opposition in Ulster and can grind it out.
So they can get the dubs.
Yeah,
they can get the dubs. They can get Armagh
or
they can get Derry.
All right. Who do you want? Do you want the Dubs in the quarter final?
No, don't be trying to lead me down this now where you're clipping it up going, I want the Dubs. We took them in the semi-final back and we'd take them again.
Well, that's what you had it very close to the tip of your tongue there, Nathan. Practicing the lines. Come on.
Each one brings its own unique challenge.
You want Armagh.
You're not a manager.
I think you would like to avoid Dublin for as long as possible, wouldn't you?
Yeah. From a Monaghan perspective,
are you going to beat them in the final, or are you going to beat them in the quarter or semis? Is that not it?
Well, they beat them in the semi-final a couple of years ago, so
this is going to be the year
maybe wait till then.
You beat Galway in a knockout game, you beat Kerry, you beat the Dubs, you beat somebody else, and then Tyrone beat you in the final again.
Yeah, Tyrone just coming through sneakily. Derek Hannon produces performance like his father and beats Mayo again in the All-Ireland final.
Well, Monaghan win their first All-Ireland.
All of these things are possible, but from where Mayo were last week after the defeat to Cork, to being able to turn it around in the second half, hairy enough at the end. I see a couple of people writing about it saying their game management was generally quite good. It felt until the last minute of injury time when a bit of panic set in, and Brian Reap made every single match they played this year, it feels like he's made a brilliant save, but almost got caught out when he came for that high ball in, and luckily it was Fionn McDonough who was back covering on the line.
I think Conor Gleeson had kept 3 clean sheets in the last 3 games, so you're thinking that this game with wind, a goal is going to win it, and then when McBreen scores the goal, you're thinking, Galway need a goal. Reap makes the save from Tierney then in the second half late on as well, to stop that goal from going in. It was just one of those games that just, it felt like it could go either way, but yeah, I think the lead at half time wasn't significant enough for Galway to have done it. And then as you say, the injuries, but you can talk about the injuries till the cows come home. Teams need to have strength and depth, and I think Galway, we were saying this year, did have strength and depth. And you look at the subs coming on yesterday, they're all brilliant subs, like Tom O'Callaghan, Cal Sweeney, the impact.
You can have as much strength and depth as you want, but if your full back and your talisman up front, your 2 talismen aren't on it. Like, if you look, both Mayo and Galway had 16 shots from play. Mayo scored 10 points, Galway scored 7 points. You look at the quality of the points that Paddy Durkin kicked in the second half. Galway missed a few opportunities like that when they had the win, and that, in a 1-point game, is pretty much the difference.
Yeah. But the big thing was that they shouldn't have been playing this week if they'd kicked the penalty last week, and they even, so all of a sudden we now understand that every one of those games really matters, and you've got to do your business week in, week out, and that's why the Dubs and Derry and to a certain extent Armagh are kicking their heels this week, watching everybody else knock lumps out of each other, going, yeah, that's great, bring it on. So we shall see next week what the benefits of that were. Mayo win was a fluke, lads. We saw their level in the second half between Louth and Cork. Expect a big beating come the quarter-final, says Dave Cos, who I think may be trying to verbalise it, manifest it into existence.
The Louth game was won. Whatever about the Cork match, I think the Louth game, they're absolutely in control. It was a 5 points up heading into injury time and they just switched off. Cork was more of a concern, but again, was there just a game management issue there?
Like James Horn was making the point with Tommy afterwards, look, teams won't really fear playing Mayo now, but I also think that the team that in the draw this morning, the 4 already qualified quarterfinalists will want to avoid, like compared to Cork, Monaghan.
Absolutely. I think if you're one of the 4 winners, I think you're looking going, we want to avoid Mayo because of the madness and the unpredictability.
Yeah,
and this was Mayo at their absolute peak under Rochford in those 2 years when they pushed Dubs to the wire. Like, you look at the years going through the qualifiers, like, was it Cork one year? Like, again, they're pretty much beaten week on week on week in the qualifiers, and they'd somehow find a way to do it.
It's not the same team anymore, really, is
no,
the
it's
thing.
not.
So you can't just take the spirit animal of the last decade and assume that this one is going to be the same. There's been enough turnover in personnel, and you'd hope that they've learned some of the game management things. We should talk about Cork and their renaissance. If you think back to the games that they lost, like the first game was against Meath in the league, where Meath scored all those goals, and I was like, oh, this is going to be a long year for Cork. And then the game against the Dubs, where it was the width of a post that stopped them from winning that, and then they went on a bit of a run. And like, obviously they were horrific in the Munster Championship, but their recovery from that point to this, again, I think it's it's a much better system now, where you get 3 games to learn the lessons and implement those. And the Mayo comeback obviously wasn't a fluke. Now, I don't know, I feel a lot of sympathy with Roscommon. It looked like they'd done everything right. It looked like they were going to use the lessons of the whole season to see out the game and win it. They get turned over, and then Cork, rapier-like, straight down, twist of the knife over the bar, and that's the win in the game. And suddenly Roscommon are bereft. And we'll speak with Davy Burke later on in the week about the season they had, and I feel real sympathy for them, because I think they had a couple of all-stars in the making, and I don't know if you don't make it to the quarterfinals in Croke Park, can you still win an all-star? We shall see. Hopefully they get a nomination. But are Cork back? Is this like
I think if you beat two Division 1 teams 2 weeks in a row, you're back. Like, to beat Mayo and Roscommon now, and the manner in which they did it, because when, as you said, Ger, when Roscommon come back from 5 points down and equalise later on, the momentum is with them, massively so. And I did maybe Roscommon's tactics come back to bite them a little bit in injury time. Like, Conor Daly throws the ball to himself, turned over. They're clear, like you could see the Roscommon selectors with the 3 fingers up, going 3 minutes left, basically saying keep the ball for 3 minutes, take your point in the last of those additional minutes, and it just didn't work. Like, it would have worked if they'd managed to keep the ball and not have that little error from Conor Daly, but as you say, Kevin O'Donovan comes up the pitch and they take the point. So maybe Roscommon's tactics that they got criticised and crucified for against Dublin came back to bite them. But hindsight's 2020. If they hadn't made that small error, we wouldn't be talking about that. But Cork can take another scalp. Like, there's no doubt about it. If Cork get drawn against Dublin or Kerry again, that there's no reason why they can't win those games. Well, sorry, they can't get drawn against Kerry, of course. But I think they can take another big victory. Like, what John Cleary's done there has been amazing. And teams will again want to avoid them.
Yeah.
Are they back to winning an All-Ireland? Not yet, but are they back being relevant, where actually
we have to analyse them, as opposed to
when we're talking about Cork-Kerry clashes over the next couple of years, we're not just talking about how many that they can put it up to the big guns again. So Roscommon's tactics, maybe it was a good thing that it comes back to bite you in the ass eventually. Maybe those tactics work against a team like Dublin, where you got to do that. Actually, against Cork, do you just kick on and win the game?
Maybe, I don't know. I think that's their new identity, and it nearly saw them through. And again, if they were one of those teams in Croke Park in quarterfinal weekend, nobody want to see them, but they're gone, and that is the way the championship worked out for them. Okay, what's next?
Yeah, let's move on to the other green, and I suppose Clare deserve certainly a strong mention after their performance against Dublin at the weekend. We all expected it, but
it's Tony Kelly, right?
It's Tony Kelly's performance. The hat trick probably surprised nobody, given it's Tony Kelly and he does Tony Kelly things week after week. But Clare look stronger than they did last year, and you'd expect they'll have learned from that semi-final last year, and certainly going into this Kilkenny game, possibly be favourites, would they?
No.
Oh,
I think so.
That's a good question. I think on performance level, you would say that Clare probably should be favourites, but the muscle memory that's there for Kilkenny would suggest that maybe not.
Possibly. It's the injury, isn't it, that you want to be concerned about, I guess. John Conlon with that head injury looked like a concussion possibly. Shane O'Donnell picked up a slight knock as well, and then you have Conor Cleary, Aidan McCarthy and David McInerney already on the sidelines. So I think from
2 weeks now though for them, so
of course, yeah, so maybe that'll dictate who's favourites as well. But yeah, it was concerning enough for Conlon. He was on the ground for 4 minutes, and of course missed last year's All-Ireland semi-final with injury as well. So yeah, the next fortnight's going to be fairly critical, I think, for Clare's chances against Kilkenny in that game.
You are correct.
Clare marginally
5-4 on Kilkenny, 5-4.
Okay. That will depend on the injuries as well, I think, for Clare.
Well, they had injuries going into that game on Saturday. Aidan McCarthy wasn't there. You do look at Clare and they have to feel we are the team that can beat Limerick. We have shown that we have the ability, that we can go toe to toe with them. They should have beaten them in the Munster final. Over the last 2 years, consistently, they've been right there. They didn't. I get that they didn't. But the quality that they have.
They did this season. In the
the round robin, but not in the Munster final. And they have different players stepping up in different games. So like Tony Kelly scores 3-4. Whether it's Shane O'Donnell, Peter Duggan, Dave Fitzgerald. It is the John Conlon thing, but you'd have to think mentally they should be in a better position, where it felt as though Conlon's injury last year totally derailed them in the semi-final. That there was too much in that.
I think there was something else going on there apart from that as well. So we look. I'm just trying to find Tony Kelly isn't even on the top 10 list of top scorers in the championship at the moment. I was wondering
he doesn't take the freeze anymore.
If he might be able to.
Aidan McCarthy takes the freeze, so
close the gap on Patrick Horgan or TJ Reid, but he won't be able to. It's too big. It's hundreds of points. Now he does have a long time to go. So at the start of the year he was 13th on the list. Literally 200 points behind.
I was interested to listen to Brian Lohan after the game, because he was like, personnel wise we're better this year than last, and he also said we're not as washed out as we were last year. Like the Munster Championship didn't take as much out of Clare this year as perhaps in previous years. In the first 11 minutes they had 6 wides yesterday, and you're thinking, oh, this isn't great, but 5-26 ultimately, and I think we've got 2 tantalising semi-finals, probably the 2 pairings that we wanted.
Yeah, I don't think that we're putting Clare in the green here because Clare are going to be in an All-Ireland semi-final in rude health, as opposed to last year when it did look like they were a bit washed out, and they stuttered through this round. There was no stuttering yesterday. That 3-2 burst just before half time decided the game. Look, we're going to get on to Tipperary, so let's keep going.
Yep, into the Amber, and Irish golf in the Amber. Looked for large swathes of yesterday afternoon that we were going to have an Irish winner at the major. It was going to be Leona Maguire or Stephanie Meadow, and both of them I remember reading comments from Stephanie Meadow before saying when she was 13 Leona was 10, and she first met her when Leona was still reading Harry Potter books. So like their friendship goes back so long. Curtis Cups together, of course, Olympics together, but yesterday afternoon I think Leona Maguire will be very disappointed. Her 74 left her tied for 11th ultimately. Stephanie Meadow shooting a 1 under 70 yesterday. That's her career best in a major, tying for 3rd. So kind of failing to fire in the final round. That was the KPMG Women's USPGA course in New Jersey. Ruoning Yin, the ultimate winner, coming from behind as well with an extraordinary final round from her at 8 under par, 1 shot ahead of Japan's Yuka Sasso and 2 ahead of the quintet of players at 600. That included Stephanie Meadow. I think Leona will be disappointed. I know her, she was talking ahead of the final round, saying she was in a different position leading into the final round, which was strange for her.
I think Leona will be disappointed, and Stephanie might be devastated with how it finished up. It was interesting watching their embrace, and I was trying to look at the body language as they were going down 18, and Leona Maguire was out of it by then, but Stephanie Meadow knew that if she eagled 18, which was going to be a massive task, it was a par 5 but reachable in 2, that she would force a playoff. And she's standing 247 yards from the green, middle of the fairway, 3 wood in hand, and has, I'm sure, what is the worst moment of her professional career, where she tops a 3-wood in the worst possible way.
One that skips across the water.
Incredibly fortunate it doesn't bounce into the water, doesn't connect with it at all, and you knew from the look at her face, she knew that was it. Now, she hit a really good approach, misses the putt, ends up in a tie for third when she could have finished second, and all of that's very important for Stephanie Meadow, because it's been a bit of a struggle over the last couple of years, and you really hope that this ignites. But it was such a brilliant opportunity. Listen, I'm not saying she was going to eagle 18 anyways, but to not even give herself a chance to hit that shot at that moment is the type of thing that can haunt you for quite a while. So I really hope that she's able to take the positives from this week and kick on for the rest of the season. And next week the US Open is on at Pebble Beach, so there's an opportunity for them to bounce back. The body language is interesting. It didn't seem like there was much conversation between the two of them walking down 18, and then the hug at the end. Leona Maguire's face summed up exactly what she felt about this. Massive missed opportunity. Never got going at all yesterday. Just couldn't build any momentum. That entire grouping. Stephanie Meadow held in the best of the three of them, but Shin, Meadow and Maguire, there was nothing falling for them at all. And maybe there was a bit of fatigue for Leona. She won last week. There's obviously a big emotional high after that, and she keeps a flow going into Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But she just didn't seem to have anything there last night. But there's still a lot of positives. This is the first time she's properly contended at a major. She's had good major finishes. You might remember at the Evian in France last year, she had a couple of years ago, she had the lowest round ever in a major championship, but it was coming from miles back. Likewise in the Open, coming from well back to finish inside the top 10. This one, she's there in the final pairing over the final 2 days and hung around, but just didn't have that bit to kick on. But again, the US Open at Pebble Beach is next week, so if you're in that level of form, starting next week, not this weekend coming, but starting on Thursday weekend, that's going to be just a massive occasion. So I'm not surprised that was Leona Maguire's. I don't think she'd be looking at any positives. I go back to this time last year, interviewing her down at Adair Manor after a round at the JP McManus Pro-Am, where obviously it's a celebration, and she just came off the course and like, obviously this is a great day. There was huge crowds following her around, all of that. Everyone was going in to have their fancy dinner, watch a bit of Westlife and all that. Not Leona, who was desperately disappointed with her round, couldn't hide it, was going to the putting green for an hour to try and fix things after the JP McManus Pro-Am, which sort of shows where her mindset is, even at things like that. So yeah, I think Amber is right. You would hope that Stephanie Meadow, this is her best performance in years. I think she finished third on her pro debut at the US Open in 2014, but this should at least seal her card and be able to relax her a little bit. She just got married recently, so off the course things seem to be in a good place as well for Stephanie Meadow, but that shot on 18 is one that I think
we'll live with her for a while.
Exactly.
She'll be living through it. Yeah, I guess Padraig Harrington we should mention as well. That's why we have Golf and Amber, because for him last night was unbelievable. Trailed by 5 shots with 7 holes to play.
What tournament did he win?
This is the Dick's Sporting Goods Open, so he's defended his title. And sorry, but the back
like my 2 kids when they're in America, it's like Dick's Sporting Goods. That's the greatest name I've ever seen. You've never lost it, Ger.
Oh, come on, you got to take it when you
you got what?
Smoke 'em when you got him.
Oh God, I'll move on from that one, get that image out of my head. But final line 28 was just remarkable. Was it 5 birdies and an eagle, like towards the back end?
Yeah, it was ridiculous finish from Harrington, defending his title here. And again, the US Seniors Open is on this week. Harrington,
Wisconsin,
went all the way against Steve Stricker in the last major, won the US Open last year. You got to think
he's going to do it again.
Right there.
I keep pointing this out, but he's winning more in prize money now than he ever did in his best years. Even the years when he was winning 2 majors in the same season, he actually won more in real terms. Obviously, not including inflation. I understand.
The taxes.
Boring economist out there. But
$315,000 for last night's win, and that takes him to over $1 million, I think, on the PGA Tour this year.
And it's barely got going.
It's not bad. And look, he was tied for 5th overnight heading into the final round, so he probably hadn't really considered the fact that he could probably win. But what a performance. 51 years of age, still flying at Padraig Harrington. So Irish golf, deservedly.
Edward Freeman wants to ask, is Ryan O'Donoghue in the red for his cheap shot stamp that will surely get him a suspension for the weekend? There's no you don't get suspended anymore in the there has to be, you have to kill somebody to get suspended from this point of the tournament on.
Listen, as Sean Kavanagh said, it takes 2 to tango. Now, it did look as though maybe Sean Kelly was tangoing with somebody else at the time.
Sometimes, as Sean Kavanagh well knows, it only takes 1 to tango. So let me just say that.
It's hard, considering the video footage that they have. Now, it didn't look good from Ryan O'Donoghue, the little look down first, but they don't have the footage of the feet.
Right.
You know,
So you think it'll be grand?
it's like trying to judge them strictly, but not only seeing the top half of things, you know. There's a lot going on down under.
I can't deal with another Mayo for Sam Summer and inevitable failure. Hopefully they're gone the next day, says Shane, who I think is a Mayo fan, judging by that. I think he's a Mayo fan. I hope they're gone the next day.
Well, the good thing about this championship is it's not going to last very long anyways now. It'll all be done in a month, so.
Yeah. How do we feel about that? Like, as the weather gets good and the play gets good, everybody's gone.
I'm happy for the players. I think they finally get a summer break, summer holidays.
Well, they're going to straight back into club action because we all know the club is where you start and club is where you end. You'll die a club man.
100%.
Roscommon are awful to watch. Not sure how far Cork will go, but delighted that awful brand of football didn't win, says D. Muller.
I don't know about that. I don't agree with that.
Come on, what do you? Well, they're not here for your entertainment. They're here to win. This is
exactly.
senior championship football. That's their job.
Roscommon have had a good year.
Oh, this art gallery is boring. Well, don't watch.
Exactly. Look, it was boring to watch Monaghan and Kildare at times, but if your team is involved, you're still excited. You're still on the edge of your seat. You know,
Does everyone forget the hits the Mayo forwards have been getting all season? It's about time they gave some back, says Kevin Brannigan.
What about Aidan O'Shea and the tee? Eamon Fitz pointed this out in commentary. Did you see that?
No.
For McBreen's goal, Aidan O'Shea is passed the ball and lays it back off to McBreen for the assist, and he has Conor Gleeson's kicking tee in his hand, as full forwards tend to do. They will just run about with the tee in their hand, thinking if this ball goes wide or whatever, I'm going to disrupt. So they just walk around with the tee, and Aidan O'Shea has the tee in his hand, is past the ball and has to throw the tee out of his hand to collect the ball and then pass it off for the goal. So shithousery almost didn't pay off for Aidan O'Shea.
A multi-talented man.
Yeah.
Good hands, you'd have to argue.
Good hands as a basketball
Turns out
player.
the basketball has worked well for him.
Yeah. All right.
Let him at it. Move into the red, and we'll start with Tipperary, I suppose, because Tipperary will be certainly disappointed with the manner of the defeat, won't they? Like 2-point defeat only to Galway.
Tip.
Here we go again. But like Galway with 18 wides, again, it's not a perfect Galway performance, but still to have the ability to beat Tipperary on a day like that, where you can certainly say you weren't at your best yourself. They had the first half no-show against Waterford, of course, Tipperary, and it was kind of similar to that. Their starting full forward line failed to score, and then the John McGrath goal, you think, gets them back to within a point, and they might push on from there. But I mean, well, it just wasn't to be.
When they're making that comeback the way they made the comeback, everybody in Galway and everybody around the country is like, flaky Galway, here we go again. This just happened last week. For them to come through that, you hope that they're somehow relieved from the burden of flakiness and now can go and do themselves justice against Limerick.
Tip conceding that goal straight from the throw-in in the second half as well. You're just like, did they not hold on here? By the way, Conor Whelan, player hurler of the year if Galway win in All-Ireland.
That's the biggest if we've had so far this morning, I think, Shane. Like the catch and the little handoff was probably one of the moments of the summer so far, and Tip never got to grips with him at all. These quarterfinals, some years they just come to life and you're there till 11 o'clock at night and both games go to extra time and you really feel there's a bit of momentum with the winners.
Limerick
felt very flat, but you'd have to think a couple of week break, Galway can regroup, 18 wides. They're not going to have 18 wides in an All-Ireland semi-final. Skehill was making the point on the Hurling pod last week, like, you look at them the last 5-6 years, it's a one-score game that beats Galway when it comes down to it in these championship games. So they'll keep it a lot tighter, they'll improve. And Tip, like the Galway footballers, like they've lost so many players over the last year that these are the games where it catches you out. Yeah, they didn't perform, they didn't seem to have any energy. Manager was very honest afterwards that maybe should they've gone all out against Offaly last week with sort of their first choice 15, and
they had to get game time into them, they had to get confidence into them.
If they lose and they don't, we're going, players are too well rested. But yeah, it was a strange game because it's Galway Tip and there was such a bit of bite beforehand and we kind of got a full understanding of how much these two hate each other. You felt it was going to come alive, and it was just a bit
dead. Right, come on, into the red.
Yeah, also red. Women's GA, I guess, the news that kind of broke last night. We saw the protests at the different games of the weekend where teams would sit down after the national anthem and before throw-in, and you see a photo up on screen there of different teams engaging in that protest. But the Cork Senior Camogie and Ladies Football teams as well releasing a joint statement last night urging the LGFA and Camogie Association to avoid a clash of championship fixtures. So already there have been 2 fixture clashes involving the Cork Ladies Football and Camogie teams, including last weekend. So dual players of course have to make a decision. Cork have 4 dual players: Libby Coppinger, Hannah Looney, Aoife Healy and Orla Cathal, and they've had to make decisions. So you've got coming up this weekend the Cork footballers in the All-Ireland Senior Championship Group 4 against Tipperary. That's 2 o'clock in Clonakilty, and then the Camogie team are away to Clare and Cusack Park an hour later, so obviously impossible. Both teams, by the way, need to win to guarantee places in the knockout stages, so it's not like one of the games is less important than the other. I mean, last Saturday, this is how ridiculous this is, by the way. So the Cork Camogie team played down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh at 3. The footballers were away to Galway and Salthill at 7:30. Libby Coppinger plays the full Camogie match. Then she rushes to Galway. She comes on as a second half sub. Aoife Healy plays for the Camogie team, and Hannah Looney chooses the football that weekend. Orla Cathal was injured. But the fact that these players are having to make decisions in games of this magnitude is outrageous at this stage. I mean, like, no wonder there were protests at the weekend, because the likes of this happening is just farcical.
Yeah, well, there's 5 or 6 different things going on here. I think that understandably the players are protesting about expenses, equal treatment, all of that. This is one of the reasons why it's going to end up taking too long to get a merger, amalgamation, whatever words they want to use together, because the Camogie are going to be going, well, we don't want to be in a position where the LGFA are telling us when we're going to have our games that their players should get priority, and the LGFA are going to be thinking the exact same thing. So rather than having a bit of common sense and sitting down at the start of the year and working out a programme and going, maybe, well, why don't we do Saturday and you do Sunday, or something like this that makes a little bit of sense, or we just do every second weekend, and you know what, we'll run our championship on a little bit later. Maybe we'll go into August and September when there's nothing else on, and we'll just take over the airwaves, and we'll be the front and centre every single weekend, and people will be following these games and excited by them. But instead we're going to put them on at the exact same time, so even the supporters who want to follow, who want to get behind it, can't do that either. So I think the starting point of this protest that is taking place, and the players weren't fully committed as to what was going to happen last week, when we saw those very powerful images of all the county jerseys on stage together. It was so reminiscent of Liberty Hall and the women's soccer team back in 2019. This is a GPA initiative. Why aren't the men taking part in it as well? Like, this is one organisation that has come together. So while there were ladies football games on TV over the weekend, the games that were front and centre on RTE over the weekend were the men's games in hurling and football. Why wasn't this same protest happening there to draw attention to this? Yeah. Considering the GPA is the one that is already unified, that is a one organisation. That has to be the next step for this.
Do the men not support them? What's the implication of this? Because if they don't support them, I don't know why. And if they do support them, what are they doing about it?
Also, sorry, the decision to play out the remainder of the championship under protest, like, I respect that, but also, would it not have made more of an impact just saying we're not playing? I know that's strong.
But then you're punishing yourself. I don't think. Yeah. I think these sort of protests
to make a point, though.
Well, you're making a point. You're shooting yourself in the foot.
So you're 25 years of age at the peak of your career, and I know you can make the argument.
Have the opportunity to play for a championship this year. Of course, you should.
Yeah, but you bite that bullet. You make the game much better for the generations after you, and for the following years as well.
You're trusting the organisation to act on the basis of shame, and that they won't.
Yeah, I think you're into a war there, that there's no guarantee on the other side. They say, all right, we will back down here.
Yeah, fair play. You made a good point there, and we're going to fix it by doing this, and this. Yeah. That's not going to happen. It's the men's GAA that needs to fix this problem by coming across with equal money and equal funding and saying, yeah, we accept that as part of, as a token of our goodwill and good faith ahead of the actual merger that's going to happen. Here's the money that we will be paying out in the future anyway, because they have it. We know they have it. Like, the GAA is making loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of money, and that's evidence. If you just look at their annual accounts, they can easily afford to pay the women the same mileage that they're paying the men. It's a really simple, straightforward thing for them to do to solve all this. But the men players need to back the women, as Nathan says.
Yeah, it's the time it's taken. Like, and the statement last week kind of hinted at that. They said, look, integration was made a priority at this meeting, and all membership of the 3 associations agreed, but that's over 18 months ago now.
Yeah.
So like, it's just going.
And look, these things are complicated. Integration can be complicated. There's lots of different systems in the background that can take time, but you can get ahead of it. And the showpiece occasions, make sure that they're like the Cork Camogie and ladies football are something that should be celebrated. They should be front and centre of any new organisation. Instead, you're putting them head to head.
Right, that's this week Gillette Labs Performance Rankings.
OTB AM's Performance Rankings with Gillette.
Braeburn Coffee is the official coffee partner of Off the Ball. Braeburn Coffee is coming to an Applegreen store near you. New Braeburn locations are popping up every month. Visit applegreenstores.com/Braeburn to find your nearest Braeburn coffee experience. After the break, Gaelic football with Anthony Moyles first, Kevin McStay, and then Porrick Joyce speaking post-match yesterday to Tommy.
Kevin McStay, that must be sweet. A 1-point win in Salt Hill. Mayo have knocked Galway out of the championship, but more importantly, you're through to the quarterfinals of the All-Ireland.
Yeah, and that is the most important thing. I mean, the little bit of ice cream on the top of the cake, perhaps, or the cream on the top of the cake is that was, old rivals. But the big offer here was the ticket to the last 8, and we felt we were a last 8 team. That we had done enough all year, but things happened against us last week. Authors of it ourselves, of course, to a large extent, and we didn't get the job done. And good luck to Cork for taking advantage, but we were hell bent on a reaction this week, and we got it, and we're in the last 8, and that's all that counts now.
We'll come back to last week in a couple of minutes, but the reaction that you got, you made 4 changes. How many were injury enforced? Because your strength and depth off the bench later on made a big difference.
Yeah, none injury forced. Absolutely. Illness. Okay. He got a bug last night, and we had to take him out. Couldn't have him travelling on the team bus with a bug, and it was kind of in the middle of the night all this happened. Did you have a team to play against the wind and a team to play with the wind, or how did it work? We certainly, it was a big concern of us during the week. I mean, we all can get the weather forecast, and traditionally there's a bit of breeze here anyway. But we knew how we wanted to play against it.
Porrick, you were 5 up at half time in a good position against the wind in the second half. You would have targeted stopping Mayo in that third quarter. How did it go wrong so quickly?
Look, we said we'd go out and try and nick on another score or 2, but instead of that we turned the ball over 3 times in our first 3 attacks, and they got 3 scores to get them back to 2 points in the goal. Full back up the pitch, no one laid a hand on them for 50-60 yards. That's totally again our grain doing that, and it's very hard to recover from that.
How fit was Sean Kelly today? He obviously wasn't 100% fit. You had to make that call on him.
He wasn't 100% fit, but he was fit enough to take part in the game. I think he made a big contribution to the game. He's our captain, he's our leader, he's one of our main men, and look at whether if he's anywhere right to walk, he'll play like always.
OTB AM.
The Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball.
Toe pocket goal!
Ahead of this summer's football in Australia.
We're going to Australia.
It's what dreams are made of.
We'll be hosting a night of celebration for the Republic of Ireland women's national team in partnership with Sky, and it's coming your way on June 28th in the Mansion House in Dublin.
What a moment for the Republic of Ireland.
We'll be joined by the full squad.
I don't know what we've just done. I did believe we could do it.
As well as some other great guests as we give the team a night to remember.
Emma Byrne is in tears.
I can't believe it. We've finally done it.
Tune into all of Off the Ball's channels for a chance to win tickets to this exclusive event.
Sky, proud primary partners of the Republic of Ireland women's national team.
Out believe together, and we can go anywhere.
They are going to the World Cup Finals.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
We're about half an hour away from the draw for the All-Ireland quarterfinals. In preparation for that, I'm delighted to say Anthony Moyles with us. Anthony, good morning to you.
Morning, Ger. How are you?
Tough weekend for the Kildare supporters out there. We may as well do 2 minutes on this at the top.
10 maybe.
Let Shane have his lap of honour. Big story of the weekend is obviously Galway and Mayo. But I was making the point earlier on that the difference between Division 1 and Division 2 football, it's not obvious always, but it's kind of obvious in that, like, more often than not, Monaghan made the right decisions. And look, this is very wise after the fact, and it's a bit of scoreboard journalism. There's just a slight difference between the Division 1 teams and the Division 2 teams. Normally, you get away with more as a Division 1 team. You know more. You've got a little bit more self-confidence in the last few minutes. Because I actually thought, like, on the balance of play, Kildare could easily have won that game, and if they'd won the game, it wouldn't have been. It was not a smash and grab from that perspective. So, if you're trying to build a team who's going to be a competitor, you have to be in Division 1, season in, season out, and it's very hard otherwise.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to decision making, really, and it's at the finer points in the game that those decisions really matter. So it's the thing of that when you're in Division 1 and when you're coming up against the teams that you come up against week in, week out, and you're in those times of, say, 5-minute plays, 6-minute plays, which is 6 minutes left to go, and you're training for that, and you're making the right decisions. You're holding on to the ball for a period of time during that. You're making decoy runs. You're trying to get your shooter onto the ball, or it's a bit more frantic. And as you go down the divisions, the conditioning levels have improved massively over in the country, right? So most teams are conditioned now to a point where they will stick with you. And of course, as you go from 4-3-2-1, it gets better and better and better. So skill levels, same thing. Most fellas can, are adept left, right, can do what they need to do. But it's those small decisions, and especially as the pressure builds. So as the pressure cooker increases, and as that kind of moment it gets in, and there's more jeopardy on the line. That's the new buzzword at the moment. But there's more on the line. There's all of those instances, and you see it right over the weekend. You can pick the situations out. Watching the Meath match, Meath cruising, and then a couple of incidents where all they needed to do was reward the runner. Just give a simple little hand pass, runner coming off the shoulder, and it's either a goal or it's an easy point, and you put another sword in Antrim, and instead they don't, and Antrim managed to still have breath. Same thing with Kildare. Couple of incidents where they reward the runner. You should just slip the ball, take an easy score, or open up a goal chance. You don't do it, and you might get a point, whereas 3 was really on the line. And it doesn't matter whether, Ger, it's in the first minute or the 75th minute, when those decisions have to be made. So you look at Mayo on the goal, ball comes through, beautiful run by McBreen. Next thing, Aidan O'Shea has only one thing in his mind, which is, I ain't going for this. This is just a simple little 1-2 hand pass back, reward the runner that's in the back of the net. Tierney on the other end comes up, instead of going round the keeper, I know it's easy to say from here, but he tries to kick it and he blows it straight up reef. So it's just those, it's decision making around, and generally the teams that win are the fellas who are just better. And it's not even it is a skill thing, but it's also a mindset, and it's also being ready for that and doing it, as I say, week in, week out.
And adaptability to pressure. The one caveat to all this, obviously, is Cork, who have now beaten Division 1 talent back-to-back weeks, and I think we should really do them the proper service of analysing that game and their performance and just the quality of it, because maybe this year, actually, when you look at Division 2, it was like full of really good teams. We had essentially 2 Division 1 teams in Derry and Dublin, and now it turns out Cork were a really excellent side as well. So maybe I'm clutching at straws for trying to find a reason for Kildare. But from Cork's perspective, this does seem like it's the birth of a team who are going to be a proper championship team. So bear in mind, we're more than likely going to have this for the next 3 years. So you would expect now Cork to be contenders to reach quarterfinals in each of those years on the basis of what we're seeing at the moment. There's a style, there's a pattern of play, there's a rapid athleticism to their counter-attacking, and they certainly have big game mentality, able to stick with Roscommon when it looked like at various patches that they were going to end up being the Division 2 team against the Division 1 team, but to be able to book that is very impressive.
I think Cork, over the last number of years, they played an awful lot to suit other people's styles. I think they realised that maybe they didn't have it in the tank with regard to what we were just speaking about there in conditioning. Remember a year or two ago they played Kerry in the Munster, and they stuck with them for a long time, about 55-60 minutes, and then Kerry just blew them away in that last 10 or 15 minutes. I think there was a belief in their own mind that they couldn't stick with these teams. And I think now, which is strange, over the course of a year, and by the way, it just doesn't happen in 1 year. It happens there has to be a body of work that comes, but generally it culminates in a match where it comes to a big scalp. And when you take that big scalp, the difference it makes to a dressing room, the difference it makes to belief. The management can tell you as much as they can see it every night. They can see, well, we're hitting it. You can tell the players, you say, listen, you're right on an equal par, but it doesn't matter, because when they cross that white line, it's that little voice in the back of their head saying, you're just not there, you're just not good enough, and then someone like a Clifford scores a point off you and you think, and you retreat back into your shell rather than going, getting the ball and racing up the pitch and sticking the ball over the bar yourself, which lots of the Cork cornerbacks did and fullback did. I think he scored another 2 or 3 points at the weekend. So that confidence, that comes from, you don't get up there and you look to dish it off to a corner forward. You get up there and you go, no, I can kick this. And that's all the belief, Ger. And it does come from those big scalps, and you can see it. There was lots of people after round 1 and round 2 of the league were kind of saying, where are Cork going? Are Cork possibly looking at relegation? And now, no one would want them, because, by the way, they have all the attributes that you want. Very, very tight and powerful 6 at the back, very capable, loads of pace, and they're nasty. They can give it to you if you want. Massively powerful midfield, very mobile, can take scores, and then you have a forward line. I think the forward line maybe is 1 to 2 fellas maybe short, but still, if they get Hurley back, if they've Sherlock, Jones as well, they've got some enigma players. They've got a lot of power up there as well. They've got momentum now. Yeah. The old famous momentum, which is behind them. I felt very sorry for Roscommon, I have to say, because I don't think that makes Roscommon a bad team. No. By the way, they were within a hair's breadth of winning it, and possibly could have. Like Daly, I know there's going to be lots of talk about referees, but was it a foul? Was it not a foul?
I'm not sure. Is it a foul?
I don't think you can throw the ball up to yourself.
What's the difference between bouncing it?
Did Aidan O'Shea did he hand pass that through and then because I thought he lost control and then regathered it it's
a very grey area. Like, if you lose control, it's seen as, okay, you've just lost control, but if you throw it to yourself, as in,
then it bounced.
Yeah,
no, you can't. Anyway, but
I'd like to hear the referee in this one.
It is, but I thought it was a great game, and they do deserve credit for it, because Roscommon put it back to them. We knew Roscommon wouldn't die. They've been doing it all year. They have been showing what to do. But I also felt Roscommon's, again, their reliance on, well, we're going to choke the game. I thought they could have went for the jugular a bit more, and I think when they went 5 down, they had to come out and play, and they showed that they can play and they can kick scores. Remember, I think if they applied that a little bit more in the first half, I think they would have had enough room. But fair play to Cork, they're there on merit.
And I think to get far, we've talked about this before, you need scorers from the wing back positions, and from, like you mentioned, like Matty Taylor, I think, was man of the match for Cork yesterday, scoring from the back. Tommy Walsh as well. Conor McCarthy had 1-2 for Monaghan yesterday. He had 1-2 against Clare recently as well from wing half back. Like, the thing about Cork as well is, and we'll find out obviously in the draw shortly, but so they can either get Dublin, Derry or Armagh, and we could be sitting here in half an hour's time going Cork against either of those Ulster teams, and they'll fancy a scalp. I'm not saying they can't beat Dublin either, by the way. I think Cork, regardless of which of those 3 teams they get, will think they have a strong chance of getting to a semi-final.
Well, you now go back to a little bit about tradition and mindset, and Dublin would never fear Cork, and I know they say, but it does matter. It does matter. They'll you saw it this year. They'll say to themselves, we were right there. We had that game potentially, and I honestly,
sorry, Cork will never fear Dublin.
Sorry, Cork will never fear Dublin. It is a situation now. Look, I mean, you have it so evenly poised, and I know even whether it was Monaghan or Kildare, Monaghan as well will come in and say, like, I think there's a few sitting ducks in that last 4. I really do. I think Kerry are sitting ducks. I know. I honestly think I think if you have a good enough plan, I think Kerry are teetering. I really do.
All of a sudden I want Monaghan to draw Kerry.
I think you can set up against them.
Did they not fix their problems? And I know you can't tell because it's Louth, and Louth, for whatever reason, against the 2 big teams, didn't do what they were supposed to do and play the defensive structure that we know they're capable of. So it doesn't make any sense. But did Kerry not just get the memory of being All-Ireland contenders No,
Louth were a beaten docket at that stage. They were gone. Whatever the Louth lads had put in for those 2 previous games, which was immense, and they nearly pulled it out of the bag against Mayo. They were done. So in the back of your mind, you're saying yes, but then after 15 or 20 minutes, or 35 or 40 minutes, you just start to go, you know what, I'm feeling a bit sore. I'm a bit tired. It has been a long year, and you're done. And then Kerry do what they can do to you.
Yeah. Well, do we not then now, on the basis of how well Cork have played, need to go back and revisit how Kerry just took care of business in that first half and the second half was boring because the game is over? Like, is that not something that would give Kerry a bit of confidence?
Again, but it wasn't the same Cork team as what would be sitting there this morning. Like if you're the Cork management team, you're going in there, and the Cork players, there's a completely different vibe, and for all of them, Monaghan will feel the same. Monaghan will revisit that and say, right, what can we do that we didn't do well, but we're still here, and we're onto it again. Mayo, absolutely full of pomp after the weekend, full of confidence. Mad for action. And Tyrone, by the way, because people are kind of we're forgetting about Tyrone, and people will kind of go, Donegal with the troubles. And I said to myself, I hadn't watched the Tyrone thing, so I said I'll just watch the highlights. But I actually watched the full game last night because I was like, in the first 4 minutes, I was like, holy gee! I said I haven't seen this from Tyrone since the All-Ireland. They absolutely railroaded Donegal. They wouldn't let them out of their own half. They were so physical. They were unbelievably skillful. It was actually like watching the Canavan lads is like you're watching plus 16 on the fast forward. It's just they're just so fast. They're running around everywhere. It's just like, what am I doing? Like it is
dealt with the wind as well. Probably better.
Dealt with the wind, and that Donegal, by the way, did not lie down. Donegal put in a performance. They had all their big lads back.
Aidan O'Rourke has stepped down, by the way. The job that he did is, quietly one of the great managerial shepherding of a chaos and rescuing. I think he's certainly done his reputation no end of good. Like, if you were a county anywhere close to where he lives, you'd be ringing him up and saying, do you want to join the backroom team? If you're a manager. And he said afterwards that it's a full-time job, and it didn't feel like maybe the immediate aftermath of that Donegal job in particular, he's not too mad keen, but I'd be looking to get him involved. He seems to know what he's doing.
He's a very smart guy. He was a great player on the pitch. He was a smart player on the pitch. He knew where to be. He pulled strings for Armagh within a very, very talented team, and a lot of other fellas got a lot of credits, whereas he was he was happy to stay in the background, but actually be a guy that if you spoke to them would say, he's the man, by the way. He's the man who makes us tick. So I think also he tipped the hat to Paddy Carr. What's going on up there was out of their control, shall we say. But to be able to bring those fellas back to put in the performance that they have put in over the last while has been brilliant.
I saw someone posting a stat yesterday on Twitter saying, was it 70-something% of teams that had the rest week, as in the Kerrys of this world for this weekend coming, got through and end up winning the game. But I'm wondering, would you prefer to be in the position of the teams with that extra week break, or are you looking at going momentum, a nice win under your belt
this
week?
NFL. Was that not the stat?
Could have been. Possibly it was. Yeah. But I guess it stands to reason for sport generally. If you have the week's break, it helps, but then maybe momentum is the thing you want.
I think Kerry, to go back to that, I know we're jumping around here a bit, but there's so much going on. I think Kerry, it was weird yesterday when I look at Galway, right, and I see Comer and Walsh, the two biggest players that they have, and how, obviously an injury and just a serious lack of form. If you roll it back, Comer missed a massive amount of, obviously, through injury. And I honestly think people talk about pre-season and, you can get fit. I think you can get fit over a period of time for one game. But it's very difficult when you've missed a body of work, okay, to come back for a grueling boom, 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 right? That takes, because the body starts to go, where is the stuff that you did? And it literally is. It goes back to what you did in December and January. It's that stuff of having it in the tank. He didn't have it, and he has broken down, shall we say. Walsh, with Kilmacud's exploits, he came back late, all those different things, because he looks a pale shadow of himself. If you even watch him outside of his shooting, just watch him in general play, didn't really want to get involved.
You can see the movement is kind of a similar shape, but it's not at the same pace or explosiveness.
Correct. It's not at the same. He looks like he doesn't look as conditioned as he was in previous years. He looks like he is just settled back, and I don't know if it's that move. I don't know if it's travelling up and down. Maybe he's not. You know, it's a tricky situation, and it culminated in yesterday.
Terribly surprised if Crokes went deep again, would you? So
correct. You know, so it's a hard thing for him, and I honestly think that decision. You know, even though maybe I sat a little bit on the fence because, look, I moved clubs plenty of times, but that decision seemed like a bit of a seminal moment for him, because not only was he making the decision of moving club, but he was now saying to the county team, you know, and it's of course it's around his work, right? And it's a difficult thing to do. But when you have that gap, you're not with the squad. You're not doing as much stuff as they are doing. You're not getting the stuff in the tank that we spoke about, and you become a little bit of an outsider. You just do, you know, and it's a hard thing for him, and you could kind of see it yesterday, because it was, you know, his performance yesterday was way below par.
So, was that Galway's window? Is Galway's window shut?
I think it possibly. Look, they still have enough talent. I don't think they're nasty enough. I know that's been thrown at Galway a lot. And what does that mean? I don't mean that you're boxing the head off, but what I mean is that you have enough leaders and fellas who are able to stand up. Conroy did it yesterday. Keeley did it yesterday.
It means you're a flat track bully when you've got the win behind you. You have an 8-point lead instead of a 5-point lead.
Yeah,
you know,
it is
ruthlessness about going for the goal chances to kill the opposition, even though.
Correct. You know, and when I look at the teams left, I the first thing I would look at is well, nastiness, ruthlessness. Who's going to do it? Who's going to put it up to you from 2 to 15? Who's going to give you to you all day long? And we talk about Tyrone. Tyrone are very much definitely back. They have regained that.
Yeah.
And they have it, right?
I'd like to see Tyrone against Dublin in the next round. That would be...
that'd be a series. Because again, have Dublin got it? There's still question marks over Dublin. I think they still have the players to do it. But again, so when you look at the guys, I think who's imperative to get that rest week, and I think it's made a big help for them, potentially, if they use it well. Because what you don't do is you don't run the dog out of them. You don't, like, you need to give these guys, you need to say, right, well, we're actually going to use this in a very efficient manner. Dublin needed it, I think. So the likes of James McCarthy and these guys would have been absolutely begging for that kind of a week to refresh.
Yeah.
And I think Kerry really needed it. Derry, not so much. Derry, I think, are one of those momentum type teams. They want to keep going. They want to keep steamrolling whoever's in front of them. When they sit back, it might be, we're thinking about this for a bit too long. I think Armagh needed it.
Yeah.
Right? Definitely. So, but again, it's that freshness versus this energy. That's the big question coming into this weekend.
I could see Derry or Armagh toppling either Dublin or Kerry in a big game at this stage. Of the teams who've come through yesterday, can you see any of those causing obviously Mayo. Can Mayo beat at Dublin or Kerry?
I think they can. I think Mayo, that felt like a 1 point hammering yesterday for me. You know, I think Mayo for some reason had literally the foot in the throat, and they kind of went, we'll just rest it there for a while and then eventually we'll apply it. Like, they really they owned the second half, and I thought they were, Galway did rise a bit, but I think Mayo kind of retreated a little bit and said, right, we'll bring you on to us and then we'll just kick a couple of scores, and they tried to manage the last few minutes. I still don't think he has found his, again, like, they're a smart management team, so what they're trying to do is they're trying to do horses for courses, but I think he probably want to give a few lads a few wake-up calls post the last game, because I didn't really understand. I know O'Hara was sick, but I was kind of going, Matty Ruan, I think he is needed in there, because definitely when you get into Croke Park, you need that speed and kind of agility and all of those different things you should get from your half-back in midfield, and I think it's imperative that he gets Ruan back into that sector.
Is the Mayo kickouts concern? Like, you looked at it even yesterday, I think it was 4 out of their own 13 kickouts they won, whereas Galway were winning basically all of their own kickouts, albeit some of them were taken short. But Mayo, you need to retain possession from your kickouts, and if you're not doing that against Dublin or Kerry, you're not going to win the game.
No, you're going to be murdered, and that's why they had to bring obviously O'Shea out in that first half, and they put him out there when they were facing into the breeze, and then what that did, of course, is it robbed them of that focal point up front where they were just able to dish the ball off left and right. And I thought O'Donoghue had a quite enough game considering.
Sorry, they were first half stats as well, so obviously they're against the wind is a factor, but still you need to have plans.
It is. You need to have plan, but when you're playing against a big breeze and a squeeze, it's very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult because if you give a floating kick out, it just kind of hangs in the air and it can be destroyed. And if everyone's pressing up, you have to just go long, and then you're literally just putting it out there, 50-50. And you're just hoping for the best. Yeah.
What about the standard refereeing at the weekend? Obviously, it came up for conversation in the aftermath. I hate giving out referees, but
and so do I, because we'll throw out the old stuff. It is a difficult job, all that thing. But I'd say the main concern, Ger, for managers and for players is the fact that, never mind the standard, but the way games are being refereed between different games is so different. So over the weekend, the Roscommon game I thought was refereed really well, and there was a physicality that was let happen during the game, which it is a physical game,
The only cards came in stoppage time at the end, and I actually thought the red card was a bit ridiculous. It was definitely look, there's a raised hand, but there's definitely oh my God, you've touched me in the face after I've pushed you. I find that sickening, but anyway.
Yeah, but yes, but I think what was very evident was, I think the referees, to be fair to them, have tried to pick up on the old hand over the shoulder and I grab you and I go down. They've picked up a lot of the feigning of stuff. They picked up a lot of fellas going down with their head, pretending that they're, especially after stuff like goals and things like that, trying to buy time, kill momentum. So they are picking up, but the difference is so the Kildare game, you're kind of going, Jesus, everything was being blown, and then some things where you kind of go, how is that not a free?
But those decisions in that game were different because they were like, and I agree. I don't like to criticise referees. I tweeted during the game saying I think the officiating in that game was atrocious, but that's nothing personal against the referee. He just had a terrible day. But I also think Glenn Ryan's comments afterwards don't help when he's saying, what's he saying? I was chatting during the week to someone, and this man is out of his depth, and he proved tonight he was out of his depth. And then he's talking about David Goff being on the sideline, and an official of that experience maybe should be refereeing instead. And he was saying things like Goff was agreeing with me during the game that some of the decisions were wrong. And I had sympathy for Glenn Ryan because a lot of decisions against both teams were horrific.
Well, look, I think regardless of referees, what you need to try to do is you need to try to make the referees job easier. So in these games, and we go back to our very, very, very first point about conditioning and about how teams are equalising out over the last number of years, right? So you look at all the games, I don't know the exact stats on it, but even this week, last week, whatever it is, most games are being won by a point or two. So when a point or two comes to a situation where you get a free, which is like the one that's standing out to me in the Kildare game is can't remember who makes him one. It might have been Carl O'Connell, who was again brilliant. But Flynn, who was brilliant, hits him with his chest. Remember that one? And he bounces him onto the ground, and they get the ball back, and it was a free. And like that's the type of thing where you're Glenn Ryan's lying in bed last night, and he's just going, like that's an easy score. That's a tap over score. And it's something that comes back against you. And some fellas say, it evens out. It doesn't often even out.
No, to be fair, Ryan O'Toole was stripped the ball from a Kildare player as well and had a free given it for a perfectly good tackle. It was a tap over free again. But I do take your point.
Yeah, but it's just but where I go back to trying to help them out. So the timekeeping thing. Like, and I heard what you said earlier on, and you were right. There was 40 or 50 odd seconds because they were taking someone off and then they were putting Wiley on. But what happens is people expect at 74 minutes, people expect the whistle just to be blown. And then it goes on to 74 and a half, 75, 76. And you're kind of going, whereas they just need to bring in a hooter of sorts or whatever it is. Just say, right, it's going to this time, and bang, that's it. It just stops all that. It takes it out of the referee. The referee should not have discretion at that time of the game. Because there's just too much on the line. And all the players know, right, literally it's 20 seconds to count down or whatever it is. Because just make it easier for the fella.
Yeah, because it looked like they weren't going to get a shot off in time, and then they didn't. and then it's like, oh no, actually they had extra time, which they didn't know.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, which is a slightly fluky element of
fluky
of all that.
Bitter Kildare man.
Totally fluky.
Yeah, fluky.
Wearing the hattie or not.
The Meath Antrim game ended up being fairly dramatic in the end. Meath made hard work of it.
They were cruising. Andy Mack has done, I think, a fantastic job up there, and Antrim are playing nice brand of football, and they've got some really good players. Again, I think it's just decision making when the pressure comes on, and you see it, and you saw it on both teams. But very, very equal in the first half. As a matter of fact, very, very equal game. Second half, Meath in that kind of a 10-15 minute period in the start of the second half kind of stretched it out, got a goal and kind of pushed ahead. But then Antrim, to be fair, were 8 points down, came right back into it, and could have caught them, had chances at the end. They had a great goal chance where there was I think it was like a 4-on-2 or a 4-on-3, and I can't remember the player, but he just soloed it up and just miscontrolled it instead of quickly passing it through the hands. So look, Meath will be happy, they'll be disappointed, but O'Rourke can kind of go in and say, right, here's stuff we need to work on for the next day, and they're going to come up against Down, who obviously gave Laois a bit of a tank.
Gordon Morris, brilliant.
Yeah, like Morris has been moving well. I think what they're doing is they're trying to bring pace and a little bit of kind of that whippy kind of corner forwards into place with Lynch as well in the other corner. They're not lacking in confidence, those lads, and when they get on top of you, they will do it. So Antrim, there was plenty of space in front of that full forward line. Will they be favoured the same amount of space? But of course it'll be Croke Park, so it does make a difference. Matthew Costello has done really, really well, and did really, really well again, I think, over the weekend. Played brilliant. And there's a young lad, Conor Gray, who's in midfield for me. He came from the under-20s. He's only 19 or so, and I thought he had a powerful game as well. So they're coming. He's given a lot of debutants and a lot of young lads their games. And it's just a work in progress, really.
First draws out.
Kerry versus Tyrone.
Yeah, wow.
Sitting Ducks.
Bye Kerry.
Do you think so?
Yeah.
All right, wow. The Canavans.
You think that's the end?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, and I so 2 of these are Saturday and 2 of these are Sunday.
Oh, that's unbelievable.
Kerry, Tyrone.
Yeah.
You're excited?
Yes.
Well, Kerry could only get Monaghan or
if I was Tyrone, I'd be excited.
So that's the first one. The delay was delayed. It's not a comment on anything. So if it's Kerry Tyrone, it's going to be Dublin Mayo, is it? No, Armagh.
Monaghan can now get Armagh or Dublin. Armagh or Dublin, because we obviously can't get Kerry anymore, and we can't get Derry. So yeah,
Armagh versus Monaghan.
It is
confirmed.
Yeah. Coming through now.
Armagh Monaghan, would have probably. Yeah.
Well, obviously it's a draw.
There's definitely the old hot ball, cold ball going on here.
Is it the draw?
Well, the alternative was Dublin or Kerry, so yeah, for sure.
Is it? Okay.
Well, I think so. I think it's a game that both Monaghan and Armagh will both think they can win and relish.
So can Dublin Mayo meet?
It's Derry versus Mayo or Mayo versus Dublin, and we'll know that in a moment.
That's Dublin versus Mayo.
Derry versus Cork, Dublin Mayo. Yeah, Derry Cork. So Derry will be happy. The Dubs versus Mayo in the quarterfinals. Is that what they wanted? Mayo are going to beat Galway, Kerry and Dublin in the same year in the championship and not win the All-Ireland. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, you can just see it.
Dublin Mayo, Kerry Tyrone, Derry Cork and Monaghan Armagh.
That's the draw. Kerry versus Tyrone, Armagh versus Monaghan, Derry versus Cork and Mayo versus Dublin. Games to be played in double headers over the next weekend.
Great games. They're fantastic games.
Yeah.
But the championships, the standard, it's dead. It's terrible.
The game is
finished. The game's dead.
Yeah.
We need about 55 different rule changes to get her exciting.
Yeah. Before we go, I know you wanted to pay testimony to one of your former teammates, Dennis Keeley, who passed away.
Yeah. Sad news. Very sad news. Over the weekend, Ger. Dennis passed away on Saturday evening. Just a brilliant fella, a great guy, a great teammate. For anyone that doesn't know, the Keeleys were the backbone of a Dunshaughlin team that won 3 championships, senior championships in a row, and won a Leinster, and we're very unlucky not to win the All-Ireland. Back in the early 2000s, we had plenty of battles with them, and I was playing with Blackhall Gales, and they were the standard bearers, really. And I always felt myself that if you wanted to beat Dunshaughlin, you had to either at least equally match the Keeleys, because they were everything that was good in football. Dedicated, committed, no matter when or how, they would just give everything. Every training session, they were just, as I said, the standard bearers for everything. Massively committed and passionate, and it's news came through from different fellas that obviously that we've played together and played on Meath teams with and played against Dennis, and it's just very, very sad. He leaves behind obviously a wife and 3 small young lads, and the Keeley family have suffered this year and last year. Dennis's sister Maria passed away last December, so it's very, very hard on them, a good guy, and taken way too early, unfortunately.
Right. We send our condolences to the Keeley family as well. Good stuff, Anthony. Thanks for joining us today.
Water, lads.
It's 8:43 this morning. OTB AM live with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition is available now. We're turning our attention to hurling. Sarah O'Donovan is with us. Sarah, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm good. We're back where we started, lads. This time last year, same semi-final pairing.
Before we get to that, right, because there has been some developments over the weekend with regards to the protests in the camogie and the football, and I just wanted to and also the Cork dual players. So maybe we'll start with the protests. We were saying earlier on that it's time for the men to come out and help to throw their weight behind the women's protest. What's your instinct about that?
Sure, I saw Matthew Hannon was the first tweet that came up on my Twitter account this morning. Matthew Hannon, a Wexford hurler, saying we're all inter-county players, we all have to be treated equally. So I think the GPA juggernaut is kicking into gear now, and there will be an expectation that players in the GAA will support their female counterparts. And if you see within the FAI and the steps taken by the male players led by Seamus Coleman to give the girls more money, I suppose that was the starting point, and that helped massively in the FAI. And from the male side of things, the likes of Conor Moyles, Matthew O'Hanlon, that's where I suppose the real pressure comes on the 3 organisations, the GAA, the LGFA and the Camogie Association, because it's not just women asking for these basic minimum standards for female inter-county players. It's all sides now asking.
Yeah, you'd hope that the men row in really fast and everybody rows in behind, and they do something meaningful to help just elevate the level of conversation around the protests, because as Nathan was pointing out earlier on, the major TV audiences were for the men's sports last weekend, and while the pictures have gone around, the amplification of those pictures has been a bit less maybe than people would have hoped for. And Vicky Wallace talking to Sinead Kassan in the papers today saying it's going to ratchet up again unless something happens. So fingers crossed on that. On the dual players issue, Cork have camogie and Gaelic football scheduled next weekend, basically for a couple of hours within each other. Is there anything that can be done here to fix this?
No, and look, I think from the male point of view, the dual player, is extinct, and because it's unsustainable. And I suppose from a female point of view, it has become unsustainable. And, last 2 weeks ago, you had a situation where Libby Coppinger played for Cork against Down, hopped into a car, drove to Galway, came on against Galway, having had that incredible afternoon. I would, as a player, her teammate sitting on the bench, watching her come on ahead of me, having done that, having played a match, having driven 3 hours, I would start to feel aggrieved about the conflict situation. But I suppose from my point of view, looking at it, standards needs to come up in both LGFA and camogie. And right now for the dual players, if they're splitting their time across both codes, they're not able to give full time to their performances. Maybe we have to ask the question, is it unsustainable? And I think it is. So while the conflicts this weekend are obviously something that are an issue right now, I think for 2024 those players are going to have to ask the question. We are repeatedly being let down by our organisations. They cannot fit us in. Maybe we have to make the decision. And while that's incredibly tough, players within the GA have had to do it 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, I totally understand the point you're making, right? And at the same time, do wonder if maybe the two organisations are just being a little bit short-sighted, because if they were able to have the players playing, both of them, they'd both get the reflected glory of having the best athletes playing. I understand the point you're making, but if they weren't scheduled at the same time, then there probably would be less. And maybe Cork have organised it well, and so everybody understands that you are still doing all the physical stuff and you're doing skill in your own time. Maybe they haven't, and maybe some players are. There's a sense that some are spawning in, and I'm not specifically to Cork, but I buy the point that you're making, but at the same time maybe the organisations could try and facilitate them for as long as possible.
With the new split season, I think it's becoming more and more difficult. I think as well, scheduling the TV games and those games and the extra promotion, there's so many things at play here. And I think ultimately for the players involved, they're repeatedly being let down by both organisations, and then they're letting down their teams. And I know they're not doing that on purpose, Ger, but if you're playing a match on Saturday at 2:30 and you have to be in Galway at 7:00, that's unsustainable. Yeah. And that's for me, as a player playing on the Camogie team, I had Rena Buckley as a teammate, I had Breach Corkery as a teammate, Elaine O'Riordan. These were incredible inter-county players that at that time there was lots of, I suppose, success, that's no question, and those are incredible teammates to have at that time. But right now, with the amount of training involved for both teams, I just don't think it's sustainable.
Okay, let's talk about the hurling then this weekend. We'll obviously have a chance to come back to the Camogie and the football later on. Where are Galway at after that performance of the weekend? Did they care about the wides and the slightly ineffective? Ultimately they're still alive and they have a couple of weeks to work through things, and they're going to be mad underdogs, and sure, doesn't that suit them nicely against Limerick?
See, that wasn't my take on the game at all, because I watched the game back again yesterday with the benefit of, I suppose, a bit of composure and calm around it. I had written Galway off. I couldn't see them beating Tip 2 weeks ago, and yesterday, incredible defensive performance, forward ticking over Conor Whelan, having the strength of two men taking on that Tipperary full back line, because obviously Henry Shefflin's decision making in game yesterday was the reason why Galway came out on top. That game was a masterclass from Shefflin from the outset, picking Cathal Mannion to play as the seventh defender, opening up that space to be able to distribute the ball into the corners, to give Conor Whelan a chance to get on ball. I'm so impressed with what Henry Shefflin has done over the last 2 weeks, and considering the pressure that Galway were in and the way that Kilkenny won the Leinster final, I think it's opened my eyes to, I suppose, how much Galway have improved in the last 2 weeks.
It's funny, we were chatting to Anthony Moyles there, Sarah, before yourself. He was talking about the Galway footballers not having that, I guess, aggression and anger and doggedness maybe that you need to win big games. There seemed to be a little bit more anger from the Galway hurlers at the weekend than we've maybe seen in recent games. There's a bit more of that aggression. Yeah,
and look, for me yesterday, that was probably the most cohesive defensive performance I've seen across the championship so far this year. Darren Morrissey, Jack Grealish, Dahi Burke, Garrow McInerney, they were relentless in that opening 40 minutes, and I think Tipperary scored 6 points, to half time, that nobody would have, given that scoreline at half time. They ate Tipperary up. 2 inside forward players for Tipperary were taken off. Seamus Cannon was taken off. Keogh was taken off. Again, something I didn't envisage. Jake Morris couldn't get into the game. I think it took him until maybe the 50th minute to actually start motoring and finding space. Midfielders for Tipperary taken out of the game. Lads, everything that could have gone wrong for Tip yesterday went wrong, but that wasn't, I suppose, luck or an off day. That was the way Galway pressured the Tip players. They just, the ease which they kind of ran around the field against Offaly the week before, they came up against Galway and they were hit with a brick wall.
Talk to us a bit more about Shefflin. What has impressed you so much, and is it an evolution in his managerial career, do you think, or is it just that the opportunity and the knowledge of his team is reaching a point now where he's more comfortable and fully understands exactly what they need to do and when they need to push and when they need not to push?
it was ice in the veins yesterday from Shefflin. You looked at the decision to start Glennon. Glennon empties the tank. Then Tom Monaghan comes in for that last 25 minutes, scores 3 points. Keenan Fahy at centre forward. I was so impressed yesterday. 2 brilliant assists for 2 scores in the second half. Really, really pressure scores where he wins the ball and he's popping the ball back out to allow the Galway players to take their points. That switch for Garrod McInerney, bringing him out late on when he was spent, and he brings in Fintan Burke. Fintan Burke goes out to right half back and wins a monster free, wrestles one of the Tip lads over his shoulder and lands on the ground. Conor Cooney coming in, and Jason Flynn, the last 10 minutes. The last thing Tip wanted to see, the last thing Michael Breen wanted to see was Jason Flynn coming in, ready to go at him for those last 10 minutes. It was a masterclass in man management and introducing a bench. We'd spoken during the League and Championship about Henry having an opportunity to see different players because the same pressure just wasn't there in the Leinster Championship. And you saw Liam Collins come on again late yesterday, and he's battling late on and he gets a couple of possessions. So for Henry Shefflin, I think yesterday was probably his best day as Galway manager.
Limerick will need a plan for Conor Whelan, won't they, Sarah? Like, it's got to that point now where he's having an impact on games. I know Dan McCormick started on him, I think, yesterday, but by the end of the game 2 or 3 Tipperary defenders had tried their hand. So I'm sure Limerick will have a plan, but like, based on his performances of late, he's tough to stop.
They've less of a plan. They've less options now, with Sean Finn out, with Declan Hannon out. You'd have assumed that Dan Morrissey would be at 3 and he would pick up Conor Whelan and it would be a right tussle. But now you're looking at Dan Morrissey going to 6 and Mike Casey possibly having to pick up Conor Whelan. And, immediately I think there's a mismatch there because Conor Whelan is a block. His physical strength is incredible. So I think all of a sudden, with the absences within the Limerick defence, Conor Whelan's going to be a massive threat, and Galway have a chance.
In a similar vein to Shefflin getting the in-game stuff right, like, how would you assess Liam Cahill's decision making yesterday? Like, certainly the halftime team talk didn't work because they can see that goal straight away in the second half, but there just seemed to be a number of matchups, as we say, that, and that's just one of them that we've spoken about, but matchups that they got wrong, maybe Tipperary.
I was a little surprised that Seamus Callan started. Maybe Garrod O'Connor was injured, but I just felt that Garrod O'Connor's form, through the last, say, 8 to 10 weeks merited him starting. I think Callan would have been better coming on in the same way that Jason Flynn was coming on late for Galway. I don't think Tip had that impetus off the bench to come in. Johnny Ryan came in, scored a point obviously late on, but Callan in those last 10 minutes would have known what was needed, and I think that was one mistake that he made. Alan Tynan worked really hard but ran out of steam. He's not the guy you want to see going off in the last 5 minutes. The midfield for, I suppose, Tip, I just felt they looked tired, and you're scoring in excess of 40 points last week against Offaly. It doesn't look like it's affected you, but evidently it does, because you've got 70 more minutes in your legs than Galway had. So from Tip's point of view, they will be very disappointed with the showing yesterday. And as much as I love hearing tip, I won't miss it for the last 2 games, and I think Galway were fully deserved with that game yesterday.
So the way you're seeing it then is they actually have a load of room to improve, and they've got the bones of a system in place. Everybody understands exactly what they're doing. They've got a management team who are starting to be in their bag of tricks, and they had 18 wides and a lot of goal chances. So you can easily see them putting up a big score against Limerick and actually putting it to Limerick, giving them their fill of it.
Our only issue all league and championship to date was that their distribution to the inside line was so poor, but sitting Cathal Mannion where they sat him yesterday, and the distribution yesterday was so good for Galway that I think they've finally locked the door for that inside line. And even the players who came on, Conor Cooney, Kevin Cooney was brilliant yesterday. Like, their attack was motoring finally, and Evan Nyland. I'm naming players here who just got into the game yesterday and did so well, and backed up by that incredible defensive display.
Let's talk about the Dubs and Clare. Like, I think if you were Dublin, your hope was that Clare would somehow feel a hangover from the Munster final defeat in the way that they had done last year, and that you needed to somehow put a little bit of doubt in their minds and you needed to hope that Tony Kelly was going to have an off day. Everything you hoped for disappeared in a 3-minute puff of smoke just before half time with a 3-2, like an incredible scoring burst that decided the game.
Yeah, I watched that game back as well yesterday because I felt I was doing Dublin a disservice if I didn't actually look at what they got right. So I was on to Ray Boyne yesterday and asked him to have a look at the stats for the midfield, because I felt that's where Dublin lost the game. They tried a number of things. They brought Dara Power out to midfield to try and track Ryan Taylor. Obviously Chris O'Leary was in midfield with Mark Rogan, and ultimately, you know, the experience of Cathal Malone, I think he had 19 possessions. David Fitzgerald had 16 possessions. It was such a dominant midfield display from Clare, and this put massive pressure obviously on the Dublin half back line. Conor Burke at centre back for Dublin, spoke about him in the league. I felt that he loves going forward, but you know, not necessarily the most solid at 6 when they're obviously under pressure, and that was evident yesterday. Again, I looked at him yesterday afternoon and what he did, you know, in terms of the positive things. I can see why Michael Donoghue has him at 6. His distribution is incredible, and you know, when he's feeding the likes of Danny Sutcliffe, who had a brilliant game in terms of possession winning yesterday, wasn't necessarily that great in front of the posts. I think he had 4 wides. Paul Crummy, and the ball that was being, you know, delivered into Paul Crummy, and the ball that he was winning, Cian O'Sullivan, the ball that he was winning, you know, that is because the distribution from Conor Burke was so good. But when the tide turned and Clare were coming at Dublin defensively were, you know, they were so leaky. There were so many gaps. They didn't know how to defend the pace, the acceleration, and Dave Fitzgerald, the pace coming through the middle, they were unstoppable. So I've positives and negatives for Dublin. There's work-ons for Micheál O'Donoghue, but ultimately when you're moving Owen O'Donnell, you're, you know, all-star fullback in the second half to try and win a game. I think that's where Micheál O'Donoghue's probably man management or in-game management wasn't as sharp as, say, Henry Shefflin yesterday.
Yeah, because that space through the middle, Sarah, I mean, you could talk to the cows come home about the class of Tony Kelly and the 5 goals that Clare scored, but as you say, the ease with which they were able to get through for some of those would certainly lead you to question Dublin.
Yeah, like Conor Burke actually got fouled after 4 minutes, he picked up a yellow after 4 minutes. He fouled John Conlon coming through, a heavy hit, and maybe that led to him saying, okay, I need to stay on the field here, and you know, you're kind of jumping out of tackles that you might have to go into, but that he definitely had to go into. So I can see the point there where possibly he wasn't the right man to be trying to stop, you know, an in-rushing player because he was on the yellow. But I think from the point of view of, you know, Dublin's defensive 6, they just weren't organised enough for that team, and that comes back to the midfield, the amount of ball, like 16 possessions for Dave Fitzgerald, 19 possessions for Cathal Malone. They were ticking right to the end. Interestingly for me, Tony Kelly stays on until the 68th minute, and he's a big game in 2 weeks. I'd have been shuffling him off the field now after 40 minutes and putting him in cotton wool. I think obviously Shane O'Donnell came off late on, looked like he needed a bit of a rest. There was a lingering injury there perhaps, but with the war of attrition that is hurling, you know, and the players that are out at the minute for Clare, I'd have definitely been minding Tony much earlier than the 68th minute. We
do obviously still await news from the Kilkenny camp, and I suspect we won't know the truth of any of the stuff that's coming from the Kilkenny camp until the ball gets thrown in, and maybe even until the second half if some of the injured players are coming off the bench. So like, while Clare are concerned, obviously they had injuries last year ahead of the semi-final, it feels like they're in a much better place than they were heading into last year. Like we incorrectly thought that they were going to give Kilkenny their fill of it in the semi-final, and they just disappeared on the day. That's surely not going to happen again this time.
No, I think this Clare side is much better organised, and even yesterday, with the fact that Aidan McCarthy couldn't start, you know, Mark Rogers steps into the breach, and Mark Rogers scores 111 yesterday. I know the lads in the Sunday game were trying to decide who should get player of the match, Tony Kelly or Mark Rogers, and I'd have given it to Mark Rogers yesterday. He was so consistent and so composed. So I suppose Aidan McCarthy has an opportunity now to get well. He's got 2 weeks ahead of him. Dave McInerney, John Conlon, I don't know if Conor Cleary will get back in time. That would be the one issue. But I suppose I was actually very impressed with Darragh Lohan yesterday, Brian Lohan's nephew. I thought he gave Danny Sutcliffe a world of torture. So I think Brian Lohan probably has options, but I would very much fancy Clare now going into this Kilkenny game. I think they have a point to prove. I think they let themselves down badly last year, and for them the Munster final was a game that got away. It's not a game that they emptied the tank in, and were unlucky not to win. The Munster final 3 weeks ago was a game they let get away, and I think mentally they know they have a point to prove.
Who is playing in the final?
Limerick Clare.
There you go. All right, good stuff, Sarah. Thanks a million.
Thanks, lads. Have a good day.
It's the thoughts of Sarah Donovan this morning on the weekends. Hurling, the protests, the dual players, and plenty more besides. 3 minutes past 9 this morning. We'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. You can get us at Off the Ball AM.
It's a universe where there could be. I was just thinking there are 3 Ulster teams in the All-Ireland semi-finals.
We're
guaranteed.
We're talking hurling and you're like, Monaghan going to win the All-Ireland.
No. Well, you're guaranteed. You're guaranteed one Ulster team because the winner of Armagh Monaghan will be in the semi-finals. Derry will fancy themselves against Cork. And then
Moyles has predicted Tyrone are going to knock Kerry out.
Well, if Moyles is right, then you're looking at a mini Ulster Championship in the All-Ireland semis.
When are you going to beat Kerry? I mean, I suppose Tyrone did beat them in a semi-final.
Yeah.
When they came back from the COVID death.
That was the extra time game. Yeah, maybe now is the time to get them. I see where Anthony's coming from. Like, Kerry aren't all seeing, all conquering. The Louth game probably has swayed us to that.
And their performances over the last 2 or 3 seasons.
Yeah, but look at how they played against Mayo this season at home, and also with Cork in the Munster Championship. It could have gone either way, really. I don't know. I'm probably leaning towards Tyrone and a little bit of momentum that they've got from the last couple of weeks. I don't know. I fancy them.
Kerry versus Tyrone, Armagh versus Monaghan, Derry versus Cork, and Mayo versus Dublin are the weekend's games. Mayo versus Dublin in Croke Park.
Tasty. That is tasty. Dublin will fancy themselves though.
I think,
surely.
I think like that. Mayo will be pretty. They'll be pretty excited.
Yeah.
About this game, jazzed up.
It probably is the time you want to get them. I was looking at the draw last night. I was thinking you probably want to get Dublin or Kerry now. Maybe Tommy Rooney, by the way,
predicted the draw.
To give him some credit where it's due, he said this would be the spiciest draw, and he put it up last night on Twitter.
Yeah,
and
he got it 100% correct, did he?
Literally 100% correct.
There you go.
So there you go.
Right. Off the Ball is coming to the Cork Podcast Festival. Join us on Sunday the 27th of August in the Cork Opera House. Special guests to be announced very soon. Don't miss out on a great night of conversation and crack in the heart of the Rebel County. For tickets, go to corkpodcastfestival.ie/off the ball. Do you call it the Rebel County? Do you call yourselves the Rebel Column? All right. Some highlights on the OTB Podcast Network for you today. Tommy Walsh on Galway's win over Tip. The Sunday pay-per-view, Sinead Cathal and Fionn Davenport alongside Joe, and the Ireland women's national team ahead of the World Cup squad announcement this week. All the post-match reaction from Zambia. After the break, we're going to Galway and Gary Sice.
You're listening
to OTB AM.
OTB Rugby.
And does Mac have an Andy Friend tattoo yet?
No, I don't believe so. I did hear someone tell me the other day it was in a part of his body that we probably can't talk about, but no, I don't believe he does, mate. If he had it, I didn't want to see it anyway. Come to me to say, have a look at my new tat. And he showed it to me. I honestly thought it was Michael Checker. I said, what do you got Michael Checker on your leg for? And he said, it's Faz. I went, oh, of course it is. I can see that now.
Subscribe to the rugby stream on the OTB SPORTS app now.
OTB AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.
6 minutes past 9. We're continuing the post-mortem on Galway's exit in the championship, and the draw has been made. Galway aren't in it. I'm delighted to say Gary Sice is with us. Sorry for your troubles, Gary.
Hey, good morning, guys. How are you? Yeah, bad Monday morning.
Do you know what happened yet? Have you clarified in your own mind why you're gone?
No, and I watched it back again yesterday evening, trying to figure out where everything went wrong after half time, but couldn't put my finger on one item.
So it was this an entire systems failure? Was it the conglomeration of injuries that you had over the course of the year finally catching up?
A little bit, and I think, to be fair to Mayo as well, the goal came at a great time for them and it brought a lot of momentum. I think they shuffled their deck very well. I saw their lineup at the start and I was quietly confident, because I thought, even bringing on the Matthew Wans and the Killian O'Connors and stuff, I thought hopefully we'd actually be out of sight. And to be fair, I thought we had chances in the first half to be out of sight. But it just felt lovely. Even Killian O'Connor came on when he did and kicked the point he did. It just felt Mayo's momentum was much stronger, and they finished out, bar the scramble at the end. They were reasonably comfortable keeping the ball.
Shane Walsh's performance has to be a bit of a concern, Gary, doesn't it? I mean, last couple of weeks he hasn't been great, but the free take in particular, there was one or two certainly in the first half that you're like, this is huge, especially with the wind. Yeah,
the one at the top of the D in his right foot in particular. It was a real sucker punch for the team. It took a lot of wind out of people's sails, and it took wind out of his sails as well. He just didn't get going at all, and they weren't ones that they're stuff he does in his sleep. I was even surprised that some of them on the left, that Matthew Tierney didn't have a cut at one or two of them, because he's a great kicker of the ball, but it just didn't go for Shane at all yesterday. And for Galway to be at the races and really in the game, they needed Shane to be at full flight, and unfortunately it was a repeat of what happened in Carrick and Shannon for him. It just didn't click at all, and in fairness, it took courage on his behalf to keep going after that ball and keep trying to kick those frees. But at some stage yesterday, someone maybe had to say, look, let's give Matthew or Paul Connery a shot at these, but it just didn't happen for him, unfortunately.
Is that just the end of a long season for him, do you think, with Kilmacud as well, that maybe he's tired or mentally drained, or can you put your finger on what that might be about?
It has to be an aspect in it, definitely. I wouldn't give him a pass for it. We've done long seasons. I understand what the long season is, but Shane hasn't done that long season before. That's one thing that stands out for him. Now he got a nice break. He went to Australia and missed a bit of the league and stuff. Was that detrimental to getting him a flow of games and getting him going? Possibly. It's definitely his longest season he's ever done, and I think, to be honest with you, he did look a bit jaded yesterday. But I'm not giving him a pass on it, because he's such a huge athlete. He should have been able to sort that out and to get his performances going. And I think the other thing that's the problem for Shane at the moment, and maybe now after this season it mightn't be, but the level he hit last season was absolutely outrageous. It was way beyond, it was above the clouds. It was mad stuff altogether in the All-Ireland final last year, and maybe we're still pitching him at that. It took him a season to get to that level last year, and we were kind of expecting that every day from him, which is unfair. But that said, yesterday's performance just wasn't anywhere near good enough for a player of his magnitude for Galway.
We did feel like Galway had real strength and depth that would be able to deal with the injury issues that were going to come down the stretch, and particularly in this run of games. But ultimately, they didn't just have enough strength and depth. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. It comes with it. It's two double-edged sword. I think you missed Liam Stade, Kieran Malloy, Dylan McHugh, Damien, Sean Kelly wasn't right yesterday. That's a fair cohort of the All-Ireland team that played in Croke Park last year. It's a fair whack, and as good and all as the bench was, and as many players who played over the league, you're trying to replace some big hitters there. Sean, it was huge courage yesterday what he tried to do. It was clear that he wasn't anywhere near. The one time he got forward, we got Matthew in for a goal, but his energy and his line breaking ability was missing big time yesterday. And as hard and all as Damien tried as well in the first half, he was dangerous to a point, and then when he went off at half time, that big ball inside stopped, and those are big players. I'm not sure anyone could replace them, and it was definitely part of the problem for Galway yesterday.
Yeah, I thought Sean Kelly was in the shout for Player of the Year if Galway were to keep going and reach a final again, for example. And so his injury is so cruel, because his form was cresting to that level again, where he was playing as well as he'd ever played.
Absolutely, and he's one of these players that brings on 3 or 4 with him. And I think there was an adjustment for John Daly as well yesterday. John has been doing a role there for us in the last 18 months that's been fantastic, and a key linchpin in the system that was working, and he got changed around yesterday as well and didn't really help. But Sean's running ability with the ball and the areas he goes into and the danger he brings, it's a goal chance every time he breaks the 45 on the opposition's 45, and that was missing yesterday, and like, we can't underestimate how big a problem it was. As I said, the one time he broke the 45 properly yesterday, Matthew Tierney was in 1-on-1 with Cullen Reap, and that may have happened a few more times had Sean been right. But these are valid points, but they're not excuses. Mayo did a good job yesterday, and our record against them in Pearse Stadium is not good.
Is there a concern, Gary, that leaders didn't step up for Galway in the second half? I think James Horn made reference to maybe the likes of Killian McDade and Paul Conroy as players who did perform well yesterday, but in that second half especially, would you like to see more leadership from certain elements of the Galway team?
Possibly, but like you have to flip the coin and look at it in the first half as well. You could say the same of Mayo. They kicked 3 points in a half, and that win couldn't be underestimated yesterday. It was extreme difficult conditions, and it was a difficult game because both teams knew exactly what had to be done. Pearse Stadium has a tendency to do this. It brings teams down to a level where it turns into a pigeon shoot, and it ends up being a 9-10 or 11-10. And I think Galway, the leadership in the first half was very, very strong. Like they had players coming up kicking points, they had lads taking ownership, they put in big hits, they did big turnovers. Outside of Tommy Conroy, no one really looked like cutting through anyone in the first half, and the second half just didn't come right, and them shots that were floating on, I still thought there was a couple of shots on the second half. I'd love to have seen lads take them on and have a go, but they just didn't, and they were trying to be careful and safe with the ball because it was tense. I think we can't dismiss the fact that both teams were coming in on the back of a loss as well. Eamon Fitzmaurice referenced yesterday that both teams were playing with an edge. It was almost a jitteriness in some of the stuff they were doing for the first half hour, 40 minutes, and I think that fed into the game yesterday. And towards the end, Mayo showed a lot of shakiness towards the end, and I think it definitely took a bit of energy out of Galway's game as well. It wasn't the highest quality game yesterday, and I think Galway probably had a few lads that were trying to be safe, a few lads, the inexperienced guys maybe a little bit more so, and ultimately ended up costing us at the end that someone didn't take a chance and finish off some of the chances that are presented themselves.
So where are we now with the Pádraig Joyce era? Because it has been a wild roller coaster where at the very start there's kind of a surge of energy and belief, and then obviously COVID happens and there's real concerns about whether or not the team is making any progress. They improved the makeup of the backroom team, and they add the steel and the grit and the defensive solidity, and they reach an All-Ireland final, and they give Kerry as good as anybody gave them last year. And then this year it feels like it's a bit of a letdown, but also it feels like the panel is bigger and broader, and if I guess, I don't know, I'm more interested, I suppose, in what you think of where we are at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's the last 2 years have been very positive from that point of view. We've been gathering momentum. They've got to an All-Ireland final, performed extremely well. We're unfortunate, and probably the lack of depth was the ultimate Achilles heel for us last year. Players came back in, Peter Cook, Ian, Keane Hannon, Johnny McGrath. These guys came into the reckoning as well. I think the panel is in good shape. I think Pádraig spoke very well after the game yesterday. I was actually talking to Tommy after the game. I was listening to a clip, and he said that it wasn't as high flying as it was last year. He didn't make any excuses around the injuries or bits and pieces like that, but at the same time you could see him, he was realistic around how the season had been. It wasn't anywhere near as high flying as it was last year. I don't see a need for a change or anything like that or anything daft. I think if he can keep his backroom team intact and keep the panel together, I don't see why they can't keep together and drive on a little bit more. The age profile of that group is quite good, and I think there's probably one or two more hanging around out there as well that can be dragged in and brought on a bit. You need a bit of luck every year, and as far as injuries go, this year Galway did not get that luck at all.
I think as well next year everybody's going to understand the value of having a good early part of the league and then tapering down a little bit and then coming back. And like I don't know if this Galway team needs to win any more Connacht titles. Maybe, I don't know. Again, interested in what your view on how important next season's Connacht Championship is going to be versus the group stages of the All-Ireland series.
Yeah, I'm on the fence with the Frenchies at the moment. I don't see a whole lot of value in them if you're looking to win on Ireland. I think if anything, they could be detrimental. Like this year, Galway picked up injuries along the way, getting to finals and stuff, and I don't know if it was a masterstroke on Mayo's behalf getting caught by Roscommon down in Castlebar on the day, but it seems to have fed nicely into them. They've got a clean bill of health more or less with Keeley O'Connor coming back in. I do think people are going to be a lot wiser next year. This is their first proper run at this, trying to taper off and build up and taper off and build up. Kerry and Dublin will be interested next weekend to see how they've managed it, but there's definitely a learning there for Galway. All right, I don't think Connacht titles are going to be as big in the framework if you're going to be looking at the All-Ireland long term, and it'll have to be something that'll be monitored, as you said there, maybe going fast and hard in the league to try and get a pre-season in, taper off, and then getting ready for the group stages and so on. Like the next 5 weeks, it's very, very hard going, and the panel is probably big enough now to do a 5-week stint, but is it big enough to do that from the start of the league to the end of the championship? I'm not so sure. I don't think anyone has that. It was interesting, Max Day was saying it yesterday, they were building a big panel over the league and it was for this period. He didn't mention the Connacht Championship at all, surprisingly, but it'll be interesting to see if that big panel they've built is adequate enough going forward.
The draw for the quarterfinals for anyone who's missed it this morning: Kerry Tyrone, Armagh versus Monaghan, Derry Cork and Mayo Dublin. Gary, based on what you've seen from Mayo, they're back in Croke Park now, albeit against the Dubs next weekend. Can they overturn the Dubs?
I don't see why not. I mean, Hyperbowl is going to kick off this morning. The fact that it's Dublin, they've got down there as well. They'll have got massive confidence from yesterday, and some of their big players turned up yesterday as well. I thought Paddy Durkin was immense yesterday. Aidan O'Shea, to be fair to him, did a good job in what he was doing. McBrien obviously got the standout scorer of the game yesterday. They have issues on their own kick out, and I know the wind was a factor yesterday, but they got pinned quite a bit yesterday. Their return was very, very poor. They're nowhere near where they were 16, 17, 18 maybe. Saying that neither are Dublin, and I think it could be very interesting to see how they set up against Dublin, but I think it won't be much in it. I don't think Dublin will have been delighted to see them come out with the draw either. They're a Croke Park team. They're running style. Linda Hessian came on yesterday as well, and he brought a bit of bite to it. They do have danger, but will they be able to score enough is the question. And 12 points yesterday from Galway and a little bit more from Mayo is not good scoring, and Dublin have the potential to shoot the lights out. So I don't think there's much in it in the end, but they are a danger for Dublin next weekend for sure.
Yeah, the Dublin season so far has been really stop-start as well. Great against Kildare in Nolan Park, but not great against Kildare in Croker, either of the two times they played them in the league. They hammered Derry but barely scored any points in that game because they scored the 4 goals, and I'm not sure Mayo are going to concede 4 goals against them. You'd assume their defensive solidity will be much better. So there is just a little window here for everybody to chisel through and take down Dublin in a way that maybe there hasn't been that sense around the Dubs in previous years.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think the aura that was there previously is there now, and I don't think Mayo will buy into that they're the Dublin of old, even though they have a few of the bigger players back. How many times have them bigger players played together since they've come back? Very little, if anything at all, between injuries and niggles, and they haven't got the quality of game they needed in order to develop Anton either. So I think it'll be a point or two, if that, in between the two of them. They're two very similar styles as well, I think, and the matchups will be key. Ryan O'Donoghue, who all of a sudden becomes twice as important now in Croke Park. If Killian is back, he's going to take serious marking in Croke Park, and he'd be an awful handful. And then Tommy Conroy looked very close to where he was pre the ACL injury yesterday as well. Some of the cut and runs he made yesterday were frightening, and in Croke Park you'd imagine the 3 of them together, or even 4 or 5 of them forwards together, will be an awful handful for Dublin, because I don't think they're as solid at the back as they were either.
I'm interested to hear your take on the other games in that draw, Gary. I guess Derry Cork, Armagh, Monaghan, and I suppose the pick of them is Kerry Tyrone.
Yeah, the Kerry Tyrone one, of course, the stagger goes on, and Tyrone's performance at the weekend wouldn't fill you full of joy or anything like that. But again, they won't be fearful of Kerry in their current mood. I know they've knocked up big scores against Louth and Clare, but outside of that, the Cork game wasn't exactly it wasn't brilliant stuff at all. So Tyrone will come with a little bit of confidence towards it, but I do expect that Kerry will have too much for them. I think it's probably a good draw from Jack Connor's point of view. He's going to get a real asset test, and if they come out of it, it could be a launching pad for them for the next couple of weeks.
Who goes all the way, do you think, at this stage?
Oh, that's a very, very difficult question. I suppose based on Galway yesterday, it's an eye-opener around how quick and how fast the injury problem can become a major issue. Kerry are in the mix, and I think Dublin as well. They're my 2 out of what's left. That's provided there's no big injuries to the likes of Clifford or Conor Callahan. If either of them 2 were missing out of them groups, all of a sudden you realise that they're very human, and you're not so sure that they could knock the lights out against the Mayo or Tyrone. But at the moment, as I see it, it's going to be Kerry and Dublin that are going to be between those 2.
All right, Gary, we'll leave it there. Good stuff. Thanks a million.
Thanks very much, guys.
It's Gary Sice giving us some thoughts on Galway in particular, but the rest of it, as Shane said, Kerry, Tyrone, Armagh, Monaghan, Derry, Cork, and Mayo against Dublin.
That's interesting. Like I said earlier, if Cork could get one of the Ulster teams in Cork, I mean, will they fancy themselves against Derry? They probably will. It's not the worst draw that they could have got. So from a Cork perspective, I think you're licking your lips as well. And Tommy made the point yesterday on Twitter when he was predicting what would be the spiciest draw, and he got it absolutely correct. But he said all of the preliminary quarterfinal teams in a draw like that would fancy their chances. So like Cork will fancy themselves against Derry, Monaghan will fancy themselves against Armagh, Mayo certainly will believe they can beat the Dubs in Kroger, and then Tyrone, why not, against Kerry with a bit of momentum. So it's one of those, it's fascinating because those teams with the couple of weeks break, clearly that will help them, but I think the preliminary quarter-final teams certainly will not be shying away from that draw. That's whetted my appetite massively. Could have been Kildare or Mayo. So close.
Oh, the Geezer Derby. Jesus, look what you ruined now.
No, I know.
Look what you ruined.
I know. That would have been pretty sweet.
You and your last minute winner. Anyway, 9:22 this morning. If you're still using the old Off the Ball app, you're going to need to get the very latest version, as the old app will soon be retired to pasture to make way for the shiny new Thoroughbred. If your app hasn't already updated automatically, and strong likelihood is that it has, but if you head over to the Play Store, search Off the Ball or check our social for direct links to update, and it's got this shiny new architecture and apparatus in the background, and it looks great. So again, the easiest and best place to listen to all of our podcasts. Now, the Ireland Under-20s drew 34-all with England over the weekend in the opening game of the World Under-20 Championships in South Africa. Alan Quinlan watched it and is joining us now to talk to us about this. In a rip-roaring tie that ends 34-all, Ireland felt a little bit fortunate at the end with the man sent off towards the end to get away with the draw, or were they sad that the game didn't go on a bit longer to try and give themselves a chance to win?
Well, I think in the end, Ger, they were probably pleased that the whistle went and they got a draw. I think if they lost that game, the reality and the chances of making the semis would probably be way more difficult. I think there's 3 groups of 4, and the top 3 from each pool go automatically into the semi-finals, and then the next best qualifier. And historically, I think we've seen from the tournament before that if you lose a game, winning 2 games doesn't usually put you in the semi-final. So if Ireland lost that game, I think it would have made it very difficult for them to get to the semis. Look, it's a tricky competition, a tricky tournament anyway, with the games coming so quickly. I think when they analyse the game and they look back, they'll be disappointed, particularly in the mid part of that second half. On about 64 or 5 minutes, they ended up going 10 points up, and after being 9 points down just after half time, when England really responded. So it was a kind of a crazy game. It was 15-10 to Ireland at half time, and a lot of mistakes. It was frantic stuff non-stop, and I think at that point you were thinking in 65 minutes Ireland are in a great position here, and England responded. They got a penalty, then a converted try and levelled the match, and Ireland had 1 or 2 more opportunities, but they'll be probably disappointed with the mistakes. They were certainly the effort level of the players and the desire and drive and all that kind of stuff, and they showed some great qualities at times, but certainly made some mistakes which they'll be disappointed with. So probably in the end, I think, relieved after Hugh Cooney was sent off towards the end and England were putting pressure on them close to their line. I think they'll be relieved to get a draw. And I think, as I said, if they'd gone off the field and England had scored there, the chances of getting to the semi-finals would be really difficult. It's still a tough situation. They play Australia and on Thursday, and then Fiji next Tuesday. So it's still all to play for. They got 3 points out of the game, 2 bonus points and a point for the draw as well. So they ended up getting 3 points in the end, which was probably relief in the end.
England flawless off the tee, Quinny, and from an Irish perspective, Sam Prendergast, who's usually so reliable, has a mini period where he misses, I think it's 4 in a row, and just it's those little things that can make such a huge difference in a game like that. So that was surprising in the fact that Prendergast is usually so reliable.
Yeah, and the English 10, as you say, Conor Slevin, he didn't miss any. His kicking was superb from the touchline as well for a couple of their tries. Yeah, it's hard to explain. There were 4 easy kicks he missed. Not like 2 of them were very, very kickable, and you'd expecting no problems to slot him. The other 2 were a little bit more difficult, but still, probably the trajectory of both those kicks wasn't good, and I think he'd be very disappointed with striking the ball off the ground. And I think at 10-3, Shane, after scoring 2 tries, it should have been 14-3. So, it did come down to probably a couple of missed kicks in the end from those conversions that normally Sam Prendergast would get. If you go back to, the Six Nations, he got a couple of vital kicks for Ireland in those matches. He kicked the winning penalty for Leinster against the Lions in April. He didn't have the kicking boots on, and that was an unfortunate part of that. But I think not alone, and it probably was just it wasn't Sam Prendergast. I think Fintan Gunn as well. Their game management and their kicking strategy made it difficult for themselves at times. So they're the kind of things they look back on, and uncharacteristic missed kicks, I think, which were proved to be costly in the end.
Was the red card deserved?
Yeah, initially when we saw it in real time, it's part of me thought that the English player had stuck his elbow out and hit Hugh Cooney, but when you see it on the replay, he shoots up really hard in a very upright position, and there's head on head, and it's pretty clear that that it was a red card. We saw one in the Super Rugby final between the Chiefs and the Crusaders that was just a yellow card, and it was worse. It was head on head as well. The referee had no hesitation when he looked and went to the TMO and looked at it on the big screen that it was a red card. So he got himself concussed as well, Hugh Cooney, and took a heavy knock and then got a red card. So he'll be a loss now. He'll miss the Australian game, and it was. You couldn't argue and say that it wasn't. There's a duty of care, obviously, and that's been happening for in recent times about the tackle player, and it's very well highlighted that you've got to go lower. So he was very upright, and it was a red card. Yes.
The one in Super Rugby is a little bit concerning, right? Because it's so high profile. Is there any sense that we're about to enter into a period of uncertainty where referees decide not to, in inverted commas, ruin games when it comes to the World Cup?
Well, the bunker situation that was in for the 20s there, where that was happening in Super Rugby, where if a referee is unsure, if it's kind of between that yellow and red situation, Ger, where they're not sure, and the pressure is off them a little bit more now, where they can give a yellow card and it's reviewed by the TMO. There's a 10-minute situation, it can be upgraded to a red. Between the Chiefs and the Crusaders, the yellow was given by the referee, and it was to be reviewed, and then it was reviewed and deemed just a yellow. I thought that's crazy, and it probably just shows the Southern Hemisphere, their view on this is still a little bit skewed. A lot of the talk in the last number of years was the game has been ruined by red cards, and the game has gone soft, all that kind of stuff. We've heard some of those comments, and totally conflicting opinions from ex-players and the media from in the Northern Hemisphere to the Southern Hemisphere, if you know what I mean. And so I was just very surprised with that one, that it wasn't upgraded to a red, particularly when you see the 20s and you see the similar kind of incident, straight away a red card, no complaints from anyone watching it, because as the tackle player you've got to be more careful and go lower. So that would be concerning, yes. It's obviously more high profile, the World Cup, but this, there's a lot of viewers and a lot of people watching Super Rugby final as well, and probably people scratching their heads saying why it wasn't upgraded to a red.
Is discipline a concern going forward, Quinny? Because aside from the red, of course, for Cooney, you've got the sin bin for Mangan as well, and that third quarter seemed to be the kind of the turning point and the ebb and flow back in England's direction for a period at least.
I don't think discipline is a problem. I think Dermot Mangan's one was kind of a chance in your arm scenario, really, that I've probably been in that position myself a few times, where you're under pressure. England are putting the squeeze on Ireland. They're after getting over the gain line. They're close to the Ireland line, and he's trying to scramble around to get a turnover, goes off his feet, and that's temptation to kind of bring the ball with you as you're falling, be cleaned out as well. Obviously from a referee's point of view and an attacking point of view, you don't get the benefit of the doubt to those ones. If he stays on his feet another little bit, maybe he'll get the penalty. But no, I don't think so. I think they were a brilliant side, Shane. I think there was moments in the game where I was just watching it and going, these guys are really tenacious, resilient, collectively very, very good. Their attack is, they're always on the go, trying to create space and move the ball. And Richie Murphy's done a great job with them. I think if you surmise the performance, you'd probably look back and say they lacked a little bit of control and game management at times, and probably should have played a little bit of cup rugby, if you like. But it's kind of in their DNA, the way they attack. If you look at the Six Nations, in winning the Grand Slam, they scored the most points of any team that have ever won it. But they've also conceded the most points of any team that's ever won it. So that would indicate they just need to be a bit better in defence and a bit more controlled. And some of the pressure they had from England on Saturday was kind of self-inflicted. Poor clearances, running the ball when they probably should have kicked the ball. Just being a little bit of shrewd and managing the scoreboard, so building pressure and just turning the opposition. But look, credit to England were very, very powerful, and they had some kind of really big ball carriers who punished Ireland at times. But if you look back at it, I thought it was a game Ireland should have won if they were a bit shrewder.
All right, Quinny, we'll leave it there. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers, lads.
More from Quinny later on in the week. Obviously, we'll keep an eye on the rest of that tournament. Australia on Thursday and then Fiji after that. If they want to make the top four in the group, they obviously have to beat Australia and beat them well. Right, on tomorrow's show, Shane and Johnny Ward live with Cork football manager John Cleary. We'll have our latest rugby depth chart, this time Alison Miller's, Italian rugby legend Mirko Bergamasco on the show, plenty more besides. A few quick comments for you. I'm loving Shane's airport high vis look, says Fergus Keogh.
Harsh. I'll take it though. It's fine.
He's loving it.
I've heard worse.
The considered aspect of the championship where games matter is making it difficult to manage injuries. Yeah, the biggest squad might be the one that is left standing at the end, or the team who suddenly finds a bit of form. And is that what Tyrone did? I don't know. Certainly Moyles thought so. Stephen Donlan says, I knew as soon as Tommy back Galway my dreams would be shattered. That lad is nothing but bad luck, or just doesn't have a clue one way or the other. Woo.
To say that I was sitting watching the game with my Galway father yesterday, and it's like watching someone go through the ringer. You're just like, when it's Galway Mayo especially, and I used the word hate I think last week in a footballing sense between the two counties, but I think it was clear to see. There was times yesterday where the camera was panning to like a couple of scuffles, and the fans in the background, it's vitriolic, Ger. There's a lot of pent up emotion there between these two counties. It's not actually pent up, it's quite clear.
Yeah, and look, it's always great when you go and win in your rival's place. You know, you're the one sticking around, and then they're streaming home, and then the rain arrives.
It turns out
Galway, it never rains at Galway.
No, not at all. There's no wind ever. But it turns out Salt Hill is not a fortress whatsoever for Porrick Choice in Galway. They might need to fix that pretty quickly.
Don't know, was it fatigue or injuries or what, but Galway had no bite, easily dispossessed, and poor shooting even with the wind.
Yeah, well, obviously the free kicks from Walsh being paramount. Johnny Heaney had one as well in the first half that was just disappointing. But then, like as Gary Sice said earlier, like Mayo only scored 3 points in that first half, so they didn't have much in the line of accuracy or consistency in the first half, albeit against the wind. But yeah, I think Galway will be gutted they left it behind them, and probably a point in it at the end, maybe left a little bit. It's probably a bit closer than it felt. Maybe it didn't feel like a 1 point game.
I know, they get, like there's a goal line clearance from somebody where the ball is looping over your goalkeeper's head. Like,
where was Reid going for that one? By the way,
can't be telling me that like they had it all under control and they were. Do you know what I mean? Like,
and by the way, sorry, 3 of those. What did you want to call it? The wildcard weekend.
Yeah,
3 of the 4 games only a point in it in the end, like, which is mad. So yeah, looking forward to the 3 Ulster teams and the Dubs in the semi-finals.
Okay. Ireland at a World Cup in rugby not playing well. I am shocked, says Noel Cathal. Screw you, Noel. Thanks very much for your comment. You can leave a comment on YouTube. You just need to subscribe to our YouTube channel, but screw you.
They drew with England.
Had enough. It's 9:36 this morning. Right now, some of the best stuff from the Sunday pay-per-view. Have a marvellous Monday.
A disclaimer at the top of the show. I am from Selbridge, County Kildare. Sinead is from Selbridge, County Kildare. Fionn Davenport has recently moved to Selbridge, County Kildare. Who knew it was the media capital of the country? So weird.
So weird, especially because like we don't have. It's not like
we weren't mates growing up. No,
but also like it's not like our parents knew journalists or were journalists or knew people in the media. Like we kind of just all landed here. Yeah.
Well, I think yours is you grew up in Selbridge and made your way to Dublin. I'm from Dublin but can't afford Dublin prices, so the nearest point for me was Selbridge.
Don't position Selbridge like that. How dare you? You're lucky we let you in.
Do you know, I don't regret it at all. Every time. I've just bought an e-bike, so I cycle into work from Selbridge.
Yeah.
Did you watch the Kildare match yesterday? Because you might have started regretting it then.
See, the thing is as I just before we came on, so I was like, when do Dublin play next? Because I said to one of my neighbours, never a lily white, always a blue.
The plains of Castletown bring a tear to his eye when he's out for a stroll.
Castletown.
I know you do. So it's ridiculous, really. It is a strange little coming together, but here we are. So just on Kildare, because I know you were there, Sinead, at the game.
Yep.
Didn't like this. I say this as a Kildare man, just didn't like this from Glen Ryan. So he's not happy when they have to play Croke Park. Grand, I take it to a point. But then yesterday they lost to Monaghan. Monaghan scored 4 of the last 5 points. Kildare, I should say, did win the free tally, 13-9. Monaghan conceded 13 frees to Kildare's 9. And Glen Ryan came out about the referee Jerome Henry and he said, funny enough, someone said to me this week, this man's out of his depth. And he proved tonight that he was out of his depth.
It's silly stuff, and in the wider picture of the abuse that referees get, you absolutely do not want inter-county managers saying stuff like that on the record. You know, if you want to blow off some steam, do it like privately, do it to your family. You know, there's always going to be, you know, some questions over what referees do, but in the current atmosphere, you don't want stuff like that on the record and out loud, and about particular individuals, and then bringing David Goff into it as well, saying, you know, there was a really experienced man on the sideline and he also didn't agree with some of the decisions. Like, of course, like there's so many bigger picture things to think about, but like football is an impossible thing to referee because the rules don't make sense. Football doesn't make sense. Like, for anyone who was in Tullamore yesterday, like, it is a terrible game to watch. Like, and you know, we got into our cars and we drove down and I brought my 18-month-old. None of that is easy, and you still do it, and like you're sitting there going, this is a terrible sport to watch. But you know, we're all there anyway and we love it for whatever reasons. And this is the stuff you don't want at the end of it. We actually all left, and you know, afterwards, and you're kind of leaving and there's lots of Kildare people around that you don't know, but you're chatting anyway. And the consensus was, look, we should have scored one of those 4-goal chances. When we didn't, we were going to lose. Yes, there was some refereeing decisions in the second half that were odd, but you know, they weren't the winning and the losing of the game, except the last one. There was a bit of, you know, consternation over, you know, they let Monaghan play on over the 74 minutes, and then Kildare had the ball in an attacking position, and the whistle was blown. But you know, you can't if you're grumbling over all that stuff all the time. You know, it's the guys that need to go out and take the chances and win, and I think that's where they're going to be at, and I think Glen Ryan should join them there and not be given out about the referee. The other thing that people were talking about as we were leaving Tullamore was, isn't it lovely not to be being beaten hands down at Croke Park? You know, it is actually really nice to be in provincial stadiums. There was, you know, lovely moments at halftime where all the kids pile on, they all play, just, you know, it's not like the sevens of before where it's all organised. You know, the kids all just went on, got some football, played around and then left. Like, that's the stuff that's really nice. You know, a really good atmosphere. The wind was absolutely swirling around the stadium, so it was tough conditions, but it was a nice atmosphere to play in, a nice atmosphere to watch in, bar football being a turgid sport.
Can I ask, will Glen Ryan, does he risk sanction for besmirching the referee?
Not sure, actually. I don't think it's Glen Ryan hit with a fine job.
Or, yeah, I mean, because as Sinead pointed out, is this like referees get such a tough time of it, and just here's a can of petrol, I'm just going to pour it on a fire.
Well, I wouldn't mind if he'd said I didn't think the referee had a good game.
Yeah, but like out of his depth.
And especially saying we were saying that beforehand, because that's an incredibly personalised remark. Someone is going to have to take on a bigger game than they've taken on before for them to get experience of bigger games. In the first half, there was a lot of grumbling from people on the sideline about decisions, but from both sides, and there was a level of consistency in the first half. There was a couple of things that definitely would have been given as frees. At one point I turned to my sister and said all of those would have been frees if we were playing the Dogs in Croke Park, but that's probably another bias coming out. But he was pretty consistent. The things that weren't frees on either side. Second half, I think there was probably a bit more inconsistency. But like you said, the free count was still in Kildare's favour. There was probably a couple of things, there was confusion in the last minute for when they scored the winning point. And I think maybe a more experienced ref could probably take hold of that a bit better. But this is how you get more experienced refs. The next time he'll probably know if someone calls an erroneous mark that you don't let them hold on to the ball for 3 or 4 seconds.
I do feel when he said you've a top-class official running the line like David Goff, who was equally scratching his head with me on occasions.
David Goff won't thank him for that.
That was off the record, Glenn.
And there's always
or he interpreted a sympathetic look from David Goff to mean, I also think this guy's out of his depth and a disgrace, which I doubt is what David Goff was trying to transmit.
But there's always that, and that. I mean, look, someone. Funny enough, someone said to me, the mysterious someone. A friend of mine told me.
I met a voter on the door. Yeah. I mean, you did, yeah.
Man with 2 pints in his hand.
Well, no, I don't like it. I really don't. It's not a good way to conduct yourself afterwards.
No.
Out of his depth. So he should never referee again. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. And also, if you look at the wider thing with Kildare football, like Feely was out talking last week saying, they wanted to show the steeliness and the resilience.
Great interview.
Really good interview last week. That they felt like there was more in this team, and some really upsetting insights that some of them don't want to leave their house, because they feel like they've let the county down, and like it's so important to people, and football is so important in Kildare. Like, you don't want lads feeling that they can't leave their house because they haven't won a game. But he was saying he wanted to show that this team had resilience. They did that last week. The problem is it was always going to be difficult to do it twice in a row, and that's why I felt in the second half, once that those goal chances didn't go in, it would be one step too far. But resilience isn't built by a manager giving out about the referee. That is the opposite of building resilience.
Or Croke Park. It's excuse making.
The Croke Park thing, I agree a little bit more with Glenn Ryan. I do think when we were watching yesterday,
Dublin know the name of the bloke on the dressing room door?
Not that kind of stuff, but I do think there's a mental scarring from just going to Croke Park for some. I'm mentally scarred from going to Croke Park and getting hammered by Dublin every year, and I haven't stepped foot on the grass. So
that's resilience, I mean, I don't know.
But I do think there's a mental scarring about that, and the fact that it's always in Croke Park.
Fair enough.
And it shouldn't always have been in Croke Park. Fine, take a beating in Connacht, take a beating in Tullamore, but I think it's a little different when it's always in the same bloody place.
So, to segue then away from Kildare Hour, which is danger of becoming
Selbridge massive here.
Do we not want to talk about the Kildare GAA Championships now?
You said it was a fairly turgid watch. Is that your general refrain on GAA this summer? Where are you in the sport?
I actually think that's more my general refrain. Yesterday there were some really great moments, like that point when Monaghan were playing around just before half time, kind of over and back. The goalkeeper was up past the halfway line. All of that stuff that we hate to see, just like sideways hand passes.
Because having watched Roscommon Cork beforehand, it was like Monaghan Kildare was on 1.5 speed compared to what happened in the previous game, which was just beyond turgid.
Yeah, so there was some lovely moments, and a lot of them, to be fair, were Kildare players turning over the ball in defence and driving forward and getting really nice points. So when that happens, you're like, this is why we love the sport.
Yeah.
Or when you kind of think back to why aren't people doing what Shane Walsh and David Clifford did last year? Yeah. So that's there, but it's the systems and the slowing down and the hand passing over and back and having all 30 players in one half of the field, and that's just still happening way too often.
Because if you're into it and you're Kildare supporting Kildare, then there's just a tension and you can accommodate it. But just when you're watching as neutral, tough going.
Yeah, I'd say Cork Roscommon. I was in the car, so I didn't get to watch it, but I'd say that was tough going yesterday.
I watched the first half. I just couldn't stick the second half. You're not a GA fan. I doubt all this talk of how turgid it's become. That's 3 times I've used that word and I'm going to stop. But I doubt that's enticing you to start watching it.
I mean, I watch Dublin play because I'm from Dublin. But no, I remember years and years ago, someone said to me, an ex-girlfriend's father, we were talking about, and he said one of the biggest problems that they've never managed to resolve is that it's very, very difficult to dispossess a player without fouling him.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that is a fundamental flaw in the game. Because in every other sport you can dispossess a player and the flow of the game goes on, but the fact that you can't, and if you lose the ball, like the rest of your teammates are like, are you an idiot?
Well, see, this is exactly why it's happened, because before people used to enjoy kicking and catching it, so they just kick it anyway, even though they might not catch it on the other end, their team might not catch it on the other end, but obviously managed to figure that out and went like, well, we want to win, so just don't kick the ball anymore, because then no one can dispossess you.
And there's certainly in the Roscommon game, I think there's like a quality that emerges that when we've kept the ball for 2 minutes, now 3 minutes, now I definitely don't want to be the one that takes a risk and gives it away, and they double down.
And I think that's what was happening, like just before half time, that point I was talking about Kildare got, no one wanted to take it on for Monaghan, even though they could have gone in up if someone had just taken it on, ran through for 3, 4, 5 steps, whatever they're allowed to take, and hit it over the bar. But no one wanted to take it on because it was just before half time, and if they get dispossessed, Kildare can go and score, which happened in the end. So there's probably a lesson in that, more anomalies like last year's All-Ireland final, but I don't hold out a huge amount of hope, because you don't really win like that a lot.
Stephen Kenny, so I think it was inevitable that the Sunday papers would have their say on Stephen Kenny, and that has happened in an array of places, including Eamon Sweeney in the back page, Shane McGrath in the Mayo, Paul Rowan in the Sunday Times, Philip Quinn in the Mail on Sunday, which caught my eye, I have to say, because on page 71, Philip Quinn has proposed the new dream team. It would not be dull. So the dream team is Roy Keane as manager, Lee Carsley as coach. So Philip Quinn has been a big critic of Stephen Kenny. He had that exchange with him last week where he said the record was shambolic, and Kenny bit back and said that Quinn's conduct in press conferences had been poor, and that was widely played. I think you might have heard the audio somewhere along the way. So all is not well in Camp Kenny. The evidence is there, writes Philip Quinn. His snapping at journalists to launch into self-serving monologues after Gibraltar game, following a window which revealed further splinters in the Kenny veneer. He said, can the Dubliner pull himself and Ireland out of this nosedive? Thinks it's a long shot. As it stands, I would be astonished if Kenny is still in charge after the doubleheader against France and the Netherlands in September. On current form, Ireland will do well to take a point from those games. So, in terms of an in-your-face appointment, one name stands out above all others. Roy Keane, the former Warrior captain and number 2 under Martin O'Neill. Make no mistake, Keane would jump at the job. He's available. These are 2 pluses, and there are others. Keane would send the profile of the team into orbit. There'd be a queue of sponsors eager to pay for a slice of the Keano pie. Caveats: Keane hasn't been a number 1 since January 11. Football has moved on so much since then. Could he get back on the bike without a wobble? He also mentions the combustible nature, led to rows formerly with Harry Arter and Johnny Walters during his previous stint. Keane would only work if he had the right team around him, someone who would bring strategy to the ticket and who the Cork man would listen to. Lee Carsley, a former international teammate of Keane's, is highly regarded as an innovative coach, knows how to handle elite players. That is the gist of that argument. So
it's a very thin argument, frankly, isn't it? I mean, I guess the only point you'd make is that, like it would send the profile of the team higher and maybe attract more sponsors, but Argentina appointed Diego Maradona, and that didn't go that well. And even though Maradona was a far more volatile personality than Keane was, and Keane has managed, and it goes down to it's so Lee Carsley would do all the tactical work, and because he's aware of how modern football is played at a kind of on the ground level. And Keane would be what, like chief motivator, like guy keeping journalists like us entertained, you know.
But I think Carsley's job would then also weirdly be fixing Keane's HR issues.
Yep.
If he's had a blow out with someone, Carsley's like, well, actually, I'm used to dealing with these elite players because I've had loads of them with the 21s. Like,
I think there's an interest. He bring a much needed presence into the Irish dressing room, and you mentioned this. It's like, ask Harry Arter and Jonathan Walters about the much needed presence in the dressing room. And it's not like, look, Keane is remarkably entertaining, but that's what he is now. Like, even you watch him on Sky, he's not there to bring in-depth analysis. Like, he doesn't analyse games at all. He's there to bring colour and go, I'd boot him out, I'd give him a slap across the head, and he's like, fine. And that's entertaining, and it works within the context of Neville particularly, but Carragher kind of bringing a slightly more kind of, I'm going to analyse the game. But, I mean, and look, and even allowing for the fact that international football has dropped, the standard of it is lower as club football just gets better and better all the time. What we don't need Roy Keane. We need, if anybody, and he mentions that at the end, I mean, like, we need a Lee Carsley who clearly has some tactical nous and experience, but Michael O'Neill would be a better appointment. Like, to me, it was just, and that's even allowing if Stephen Kenny isn't going to proceed beyond. I mean, do you expect anything to change after Holland and France? It's just we're going to be in the hole even more. Look, I think, and you said at the beginning, like, Quinn clearly had made his feelings felt about what he thinks about Stephen Kenny's tenure. 33 games, 24 competitive matches, like, lost 12, drawn 7, is it? It's not a good return, and as much as, like, there is that dynamic where as Liam Brady on his final salvo last week is like, this is the worst collection of players I've ever seen, which is almost as if to say, what is Stephen Kenny meant to do? Well, he's not meant to line them up like they're Man City or make them so vulnerable the way he did against Greece. That's what he's meant to do. It's like, and it feels is that, like, are they the best group of Irish players? Far from it. Like, they're not a great squad, but does that give Stephen Kenny an out? I don't know. I don't think so. I feel that the tactical naivete shown in the first half against Greece is a really alarming sign, and it shows that, like, a lack of approach or a fix on this is how I play football regardless of the opponent in front of me, and and it leaves us where we are. But do I think Roy Keane is the answer? No. If Roy Keane's the answer, I'm terrified of what the question is.
And Roy Keane has been in the room before. I think one of the things with the Stephen Kenny conversation, and actually there's no consensus across the papers. Some people think he will be gone after the next two matches. Some people think he won't. Some people think he should be. Some people think he won't. So again, like, there's never any full consensus when talking about Stephen Kenny. But I think Shane McGrath makes this point in the Daily Mail. Like, we can't go backwards. Like, the whole experiment hasn't been a failure in that, like, we have all agreed now that, like, we can't just go to Trapattoni tactics and just means to an end and hope for the best when we get there. So it's just, we need someone who is better than Stephen Kenny to do it. So who that person is will be a conversation that the FAI have to start having now for whenever they deem it appropriate, probably the end of this campaign, right? Like, they'd fall into the same trap again in terms of fixtures. If they bring someone else in for this campaign, they're probably going to do badly. They start with lots of losses, then they try and stack some wins with some bad friendlies against bad teams, but that's not helpful. You need to do what Vera Pauw did with the women and play some strong teams, but you need to be in a position to be able to do that. Play some strong teams, rack up the losses, but learn some stuff. Get a bit of resilience into your players.
I think the question the FA have to grapple with is, if we have lost faith with Stephen Kenny as a board, then the potential playoff in March is our priority. So pulling the plug and giving whoever's next in some kind of opportunity to get a couple of competitive games under their belt to prepare for that playoff game in March is now the priority. But then Eamon Sweeney says don't rush to Kenny judgment. He absolutely deserves the next window. Seems to be a sense from a lot of people, albeit against the French and the Netherlands. Eamon Sweeney says summarily axing Kenny because Lee Carsley will be out of contract as England under-21 boss when the European Championships end in a fortnight's time would be disastrous. The decision is too important to be made just because a replacement is available on the cheap. And he does make a bit of a defence for Kenny's record, although I did sort of laugh because this maybe wasn't the greatest way to phrase it. He says, the idea that Ireland's defeat in Athens represented the irredeemable nadir of Kenny's reign seems an overreaction. His team played far worse when losing to Luxembourg and Romania.
And it's true. And in fairness to Eamon's right in as much as this lurch, should the board make a decision on Tuesday,
which is, by the way, not a kind of unplanned meeting, that's just their standard.
That's just their standard, yeah, absolutely.
There's nothing afoot
but
there.
Should a decision be made simply as a knee-jerk reaction to what happened in Greece or the kind of unconvincing first half against Gibraltar? Just seems, I agree, it just feels it's like, on the one hand, I think it's patience for Stephen Kenny. He's been there for 3 years. That's a considerably long time for an international manager. Yeah. But I agree that this idea of unless there is a development plan in place, what's after, as Sinead correctly said, Stephen Kenny did a great job of restoring a sense of how Ireland should play football.
Yes.
But I think there is a growing consensus that we need someone better than Stephen Kenny to bring that on. So Stephen Kenny's done all this great development work, bringing young players in. This is I won't say not a particularly exciting squad of players. It doesn't, but there is something there. But the idea of just going, okay, right, that's it. Stephen Kenny's not working out. We're just going to pluck somebody out, and that just feels ridiculous as well. So I would have sympathy with Sweeney's point, but equally, I just think is that they need to be looking for what's next, and they need to be looking quickly because, as you said, of that playoff next March.
He does, though, make a point. I do very much agree with Eamon Sweeney. Even if Stephen Kenny is a dead man walking, Lee Carsley is a questionable choice as successor. The sum total of his managerial experience at senior level consists of 24 games as caretaker at Coventry, Brentford and Birmingham, which yielded 10 wins and 10 losses. There's a real... It's just we're parroting each other. Lee Carsley's highly rated.
Yeah.
All the people in the media saying that don't know anything about Lee Carsley as a manager. Not really.
No.
I guarantee they couldn't give you a chapter and verse on the formations he plays with England or his philosophy on the game or any number of other important issues when you need to consider.
It's
when you're
my pet peeve when you hear Leinster rugby players playing really well in trainings, therefore they should get into the Ireland squad. But how do you know that?
No. So why is Lee Carsley hasn't managed at senior level full time?
That's a very good point.
Get the Ireland job?
Yeah.
Are we that desperate?
Or are we underrating ourselves that much?
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Let's show some self-respect here.
Mm-hmm.
Lee Carsley, if he's as good as everybody says, will get a job in English football at senior level, manage for a year or two or three, and if the Ireland job is important to him down the line, then great.
Is it beyond the realms to consider, Stephen Kenny's salary is $500,000.
Yeah.
Of taking that and paying some young up-and-coming Dutch manager.
Now, I don't know if there's a barter system in place.
No, but I mean, it's just that, as in... Do we not offer an attractive enough proposition for a hungry young manager who is well versed in modern tactics, etc., to come in and just work with the players that are is that beyond?
I think that is one of the accomplishments of Stephen Kenny. I do think we're more attractive now, than we were before he took over. And yes, Liam Brady can say it's the worst bunch of players, but Liam Brady also didn't know some of the players. No. So that assessment, it'll get headlines, but it's not the most trustworthy one.
Can I just state, by the way, I've nothing against Lee Carsley. I don't know if he's good, bad, or indifferent.
No, it's just we don't know.
I just find this sense that he's the incumbent.
It happened. I'm unless I'm missing something, I'm astonished that there isn't more attention given to Michael O'Neill. Just neither of you particularly enthused.
We don't know if you're missing something either.
Yeah.
Is there anything to be said for Roy for the sheer crack of it?
Sure, of course there is.
Think of the content generation.
No.
The content generation. There's no doubt.
I mean that semi-seriously.
No, but then the answer is no.
But I think one of the things that Philip Quinn is saying is that, he can go in and be in the dressing room. And what you were saying, Fionn, about what he does in his analysis of football, he kind of analyses people's work ethic, their heart, their determination. That's not what's lacking from this Irish squad. True. All of these Irish players want to play for Ireland. They're very motivated to play with Ireland. We haven't always had that in squads. The likes of Evan Ferguson really seeing international football as a huge part of his career. Yeah. That's not how young superstars see international football across the board, across the world at the moment.
In Ireland, though, we've always had that. Do you not think?
Yeah, but there's also there's an interesting one. Is this
group?
Quinn makes the argument in favour of Keane as he's worked under Charlton, Clough, and Ferguson, who are clearly great motivators, but they belong to a different era. The football he learnt under them is dinosaur stuff. I mean, look, I don't know if you've had a chance to watch The Overlap. He's hilariously funny. He's unbelievably quick-witted. His without Roy Keane, that's one of the worst programmes you could watch.
But that's why Roy Keane's in the right job for Roy Keane.
Exactly. And that's it. So he's doing a great job doing what he does, but please.
And the other point, just to go back to the money thing, he would be really expensive.
Yeah, he would.
And money that would not be well spent by the FAI.
Absolutely. That's a very good point, actually.
Yeah. I do feel for the week that's in it, the Ireland jersey would be sponsored by The Overlap, and Keane's salary would be...
it would be barter nice. Account.
Yeah. It would be nice if the Irish team got a sponsor, because I think that would take one of the criticisms off the table. Yeah. But that's not Stephen Kenny's fault, and it's definitely not the players' fault.
Paul Rowan does say at the end of his piece, Judgment Day, for now at least, the mood at the FAI would appear to be to give Kenny one last chance, even though some of his closest supporters at high levels in the FAI are wavering. So it's at that very decisive point. It's not impossible they pull a result out of the bag against France or the Netherlands.
No, nothing is impossible. It's highly unlikely.
And again, but if they play well there, and then you think, well, does he deserve the opportunity to have Greece at home in Dublin to right some wrongs? Maybe you do, and then suddenly you're at the end of the campaign. There are only 4 games left. It's not this mammoth commitment. So I suspect he'll see out the campaign barring disaster against France and the Dutch.
AM with Gillette Labs. Get the ultimate shave or your money back. Neon Night Edition available now.